Aldi attracts lots of shoppers with its low prices, but some items aren't even worth the low cost. Since they're sealed in cans, it's not always easy to tell which canned foods hit the mark and which ones miss. So we identified these, the canned foods at Aldi you should skip. Do all you can to avoid Brookdale pork luncheon meat. This gross stuff is a knockoff of Spam that will make you shudder from the moment you smell it. It smells so bad that you might not even want to taste it. If you do taste it, you'll be perplexed that this Spam imitation somehow tastes even worse than it smells. And then there's the texture. It's rubbery and breaks apart if you try to heat it up in a frying pan like Spam. Real Spam has a lot of flavors a lot of people love, but there's nothing that you'll enjoy about the Brookdale pork luncheon meat. Unless you plan on buying it to feed your worst enemy, there's no reason for this canned junk to end up in your cart. Simply Nature Organic Lentil Soup is organic and free of artificial flavors. It's also free of natural flavors. There's just no flavor at all. On your first spoonful, you'll realize it's
ultimately a flavorless lump of sadness.
If you look at the picture on the can, you might be tempted by all the lentils that are in this soup. And while there are certainly a lot of lentils, they're soggy and somehow get even soggier when you heat it up. If you do for some reason buy a can of Simply Nature Organic Lentil Soup, be ready to add flavoring to it for any hope of making it edible. Adding meat or at least some spices will help with swallowing this stuff, but the mushy texture will remain a turn-off no matter what you do to it. There's simply nothing to like about Casa Mamita traditional refried beans. This Aldi exclusive manages to ruin refried beans, which, truthfully, isn't easy to do. Firstly, it's oddly fibrous and annoyingly chewy. Refried beans shouldn't be difficult to eat, but these get stuck in your teeth and then your throat. Second, the flavor is all wrong. These refried beans have an oily taste that overpowers anything you mix it with. Even salsa is no match for the overpoweringly bad taste. Though the refried beans are high in fiber, high in protein, and low in fat, it just doesn't matter. Aldi could give cans of it away for free and it still wouldn't be worth bringing home. Mandarin oranges sound like a safe bet. But something went horribly wrong with Sweet Harvest mandarin oranges in light syrup. These somehow have almost no flavor. The light syrup is a watery substance that is only slightly sweet, and the actual oranges are smaller than you would expect.
Even without the sweetness or flavor, this can of disappointment still manages to pack in 8.5 grams of added sugar.
If you are going to consume added sugar, make sure you can actually taste it. For some yummy canned fruit from Aldi, go with Sweet Harvest peach slices in heavy syrup. The peaches are amazingly delicious and the syrup is so good that you could drink it by the glass. Brookdale chili with beans is a failure when it comes to flavor, even though it's loaded with salt. It's possible to get a can of this chili for less than $1 at times, but it's not even worth that. Don't even try to eat it straight out of the can. The meat is rubbery and the beans are hard. And while the chili is slightly spicy, neither the meat nor the beans are flavorful enough to make it enjoyable. You could consider using Aldi's Brookdale chili with beans as a base for a chili and cheese dip, or add some ground beef to it along with some hot sauce in order to make a chili worth eating. But a better idea is to buy a quality canned chili to begin with, or just go to Wendy's. If you eat a can of this soup, the fact that it is organic won't be able to mask your disappointment, unfortunately. The biggest issue is the chicken, pieces of which are few and far between. Even when you are able to find the chicken pieces, they are so stringy that they're really insubstantial. And the noodles aren't much better. They dissolve instantly in your mouth and are forgettable at best. The slices of organic celery and organic carrots have the opposite problem. Instead of being too soft and too easy to miss, they are too crunchy and distracting. To put it bluntly, Northern Catch pink salmon smells like cat food. While Whiskers and Mittens may get excited when you open a can of this stuff, you surely won't. The cat food aroma is the first sign that you made a bad selection at Aldi, but it won't be the last. Canned salmon can be really good, and it has an impressive array of health benefits. It can actually be almost as good as fresh salmon, but Northern Catch pink salmon is a thorough disappointment. Beyond the smell, you will find that the can has too much salmon skin and bones in it. To add to the misery, the skin is tough and the bones are too rigid. Usually you can ignore the bones that you find in canned salmon, but these bones are so noticeable that you will need to pick them out one by one before you think about eating it. Do yourself a favor and just throw it away, or give it to your cat, if you think they won't choke on the bones. There are plenty of canned items worth your $1 at Aldi though. Here are a few you should definitely pick up on your next grocery run. If you like baked beans, you will absolutely adore Dakota's Pride Grill style beans. They are perfect to take to a neighborhood barbecue or simply accompany you during a quiet night on your couch as you binge movies.
Beans, Spock, but no ordinary beans.
Dakota's Pride Grill-style beans are available in 3 distinct flavors: steakhouse-style, southern-style barbecue, and brown sugar bourbon. If you can't decide which one to try, start with the brown sugar bourbon. The sweetness from the brown sugar is pleasant, while there's an unmistakable bourbon-flavored kick added to the party. While this bourbon won't make you tipsy, even if you eat a few cans of this stuff, its presence will make these beans even more memorable. An added bonus is the fact that the brown sugar bourbon and steakhouse-style beans are fat-free, while the southern-style barbecue version is 99% fat-free, so you can scarf down all the beans you want without feeling too much regret. Aldi's Simply Nature Organic Tomato Basil Soup ticks a lot of boxes for health-conscious people who love tomato soup. Not only is this soup organic, it also has no artificial flavors or colors. But unlike the bad organic soups we discussed earlier, it also tastes wonderful. Not only does the basil flavor add depth, but this soup is also sweet enough that you'll legitimately enjoy each spoonful. A lot of tomato soup has a watery and otherwise underwhelming texture, but that's not the case with this one. This soup has an attractive thickness that will grab your attention and keep you satisfied from the moment you pour it into your bowl. The richness of the tomato and basil flavors are just calling for cheese to be added to the equation. Whether it's in the form of shredded cheddar cheese or a handful of goldfish crackers, get some cheese in this soup and you'll have yourself a meal that you won't mind eating every day of the week. Not only does Baker's Corner cherry pie filling taste great, but its low price tag will keep you coming back for more. Aldi has a lot of cheap canned foods, but this cherry-powered goodness is arguably the best value on the shelf. For less than $2 a can, you can get 21 ounces of heaven. Obviously, most people will use Baker's Corner cherry pie filling to make cherry pie. That's completely understandable and you won't be disappointed with the outcome. But that's not the only thing you can do to it. For example, you can heat it up in the microwave and then pour it over a bowl of vanilla ice cream for an unbelievable dessert. Or, if you wish, you can eat it straight out of the can. Sure, this might not be the world's healthiest snack, but your taste buds won't protest. Even though this pie filling is less expensive than the other well-known name brands, you're not sacrificing any quality. In fact, you will pleasantly be surprised at how many cherries Aldi is able to fit into one can and the perfect texture and flavor of each and every cherry. The Brookdale label redeems itself with Brookdale corned beef. It's bursting with flavor, but is affordable enough to stock up your pantry. It might not be as recognizable as the corned beef made by Libby's, but it's every bit as tasty. Brookdale corned beef has a strong salty flavor, but that's part of the joy when it comes to corned beef. If you find it too salty, eat it with potatoes or toast to balance out the flavors. Alternatively, if you want to kick the savory factor up a few notches, eat it with a couple of eggs sunny side up and let the runny egg yolk intermingle with the corned beef. Don't be scared by the label that indicates Brookdale corned beef is made in Brazil. It turns out that about 80% of canned corned beef is made there, including brand names like Libby's. A lot of chicken noodle soup you buy at the store, like that Simply Nature stuff, leaves you disappointed. But Fit and Active chicken noodle chunky style soup is completely different. You don't have to worry about any of those typical pitfalls when you purchase a can of this stuff at Aldi. The first thing you'll notice are the big pieces of white meat chicken in the soup. The chicken chunks are not only large and plentiful, they're also soft and pop with flavor with each bite. Then there are the noodles, which are hearty but don't get in the way of the chicken flavoring. There's also an ample amount of carrots and celery, along with a bit of parsley and a hint of onion. The next time you feel under the weather, a can of Fit and Active chicken noodle chunky style soup can definitely help with what ails you.
Chicken soup cures everything, yeah?
There's a whole lot you can do with the Pueblo Lindo chipotle peppers you get from Aldi. If you have a tolerance for spice, you can eat these peppers right out of the can. While they're far from the hottest peppers in the world, compared to other brands, you'll find that these peppers bring considerable heat. For people with more sensitive palates, you can also use these chipotle peppers to make everything from taco sauce to a marinade for pork ribs. Like most canned chipotle peppers, they rest in adobo sauce. These peppers are also whole, so you don't have to worry about dealing with a lot of bits and pieces. Typically, cream of mushroom soup is completely bland, lacks anything resembling a satisfying texture, and actual mushrooms are somehow an afterthought. Fit and Active cream of mushroom condensed soup from Aldi breaks that mold. When you empty Fit and Active cream of mushroom condensed soup into a bowl, you'll notice a merry band of mushroom pieces swimming around. The bits of mushroom give this stuff a pleasing texture that you'd be hard-pressed to find elsewhere. Once you taste it, the rich mushroom flavors will make you fall in love. And it's pretty healthy. It has only 60 calories per serving and is relatively low in carbohydrates.
If you're on a low-carb keto diet, this cream of mushroom soup will fit perfectly into your daily routine.
Which canned corned beef tastes best when it's cold? Which tastes best hot? Which tastes awful at any temperature? Keep watching for our ranking of canned corned beef brands from worst to best. If you want tasty Vienna sausages, opt for Armour. But if you're in the market for canned corned beef, stay far, far away. First off, the texture is so fatty and jello-like that it doesn't even look like it's meant for human consumption. Second, if you dare take a bite of this canned meat, you'll find that it lacks any savory goodness that should be a requirement of canned corned beef. If you absolutely have to buy corned beef from Armour, go with the corned beef hash. By adding potatoes to the mix, it improves the texture and taste a bit, though it's still a bottom-tier option. Although it sounds finger-licking good in theory, ox and palm corned beef is a major disappointment in practice. It's made from first-rate Australian beef that's been grass-fed, and it's free of antibiotics and hormones.
Ox and palm is P&G's pride and the world's favorite.
Sadly, though, it's just not worth it. The primary issue is inconsistency. From can to can, you never know what to expect from ox and palm. But even if you get one of the better cans, you'll still be massively underwhelmed, especially when factoring in the high price. It's way too fatty, and while the taste is okay, it's nothing to write home about. To make matters even worse, in 2021, Ox and Palm had to recall nearly 300,000 pounds of canned corned beef. So skip the gamble and pick a better brand. Chefmate is owned by Nestlé, the Swiss conglomerate that's worth more than $300 billion. But despite the pedigree of its ubiquitous parent company, Chefmate corned beef hash is so boring that you'll yawn after each mouthful. The ingredients list insists that each can has corned beef, potatoes, and onions, but it tastes like it's purposefully made to be as flavorless as possible. The only flavor you'll be able to notice is a dash of saltiness, and that's about it. And on top of it all, Chefmate corned beef hash is also extremely greasy. So be kind to yourself and just say no to this brand.
Just say no.
Be sure you know what you're getting before you purchase a can of Underwood corned beef spread. As the name implies, this is a spread. The difference from regular corned beef may be more drastic than you're anticipating. It has a saltier, stronger flavor as well as the consistency of toothpaste. The best way to eat Underwood spread is to put some on a cracker, and a little goes a long way. If you make the mistake of using a heap of this spread to make a sandwich, you'll likely be grossed out. If you use this spread correctly, though, you won't be thrilled, but you can at least avoid ruining your meal. Iberia is a brand that's been around since 1930 that can be found in Spain, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the United States. All of its canned meat offerings will leave a smile on your face thanks to their taste. Unfortunately, the texture of its canned corned beef holds it back from climbing higher on our list. The best corned beef is moist when you take it out of the can. Iberia canned corned beef, however, is too dry and crumbly. It too easily breaks into tiny pieces, and it's not easy to put it back together again. Another issue is the greasy taste that'll have you thinking twice before ever buying this brand again. If you pick Excelsior, make sure that your kitchen is well ventilated. That's because this brand has a really strong smell, and it's not a pleasant aroma. Instead, it smells like canned dog food that expired many moons ago. The good news is that Excelsior tastes a lot better than it smells. As an added bonus, there's also nothing to complain about in terms of texture. That said, despite the positives, the smell is probably all you'll be able to remember. So don't settle for something that'll stink up your kitchen when you don't have to.
It stinks!
The first brand on this list that you won't regret picking is Great Value. Not everything about this Walmart store brand is worthy of your hard-earned dollars, but it's good enough to serve its purpose, especially when you factor in the low price. Texture-wise, Great Value is close to perfect. It holds its form whether you want to eat it hot or cold. Flavor-wise, though, it's not quite as rosy. The main problem is a subtle yet unmistakable metallic taste. When it first enters your mouth, it'll instantly hit you, and once the aftertaste kicks in, the metallic flavor reemerges. It's not bad enough that you'll want to spit it out, but it's still pretty annoying. Canned corned beef is popular in the Caribbean, so considering that Goya is known for selling Caribbean food items, it's no wonder that Goya corned beef exists. And it's definitely above average, but only if you warm it up first. The best canned corned beef tastes great regardless of whether you eat it hot or cold, but this isn't something you'll want to eat at lower temps. The texture is too rubbery and the flavor is muted right out of the can. When you heat it up, though, the texture drastically improves and the realistic beef-like flavor emerges. If you always heat your canned corned beef, you're good to go. Otherwise, look elsewhere. Back in 1937, Hormel introduced Spam to the world. Even if you think Spam is disgusting, you should still give Hormel corned beef hash a try. It's bursting with flavors and surprisingly hearty. If you eat it for breakfast, you can be sure that you'll start your day on the right foot. Simply put, there are good reasons why this is one of America's top-selling corned beef hash. Be forewarned, though, that when you go shopping for this brand, you'll need to be on your toes. If you accidentally buy Hormel corned beef instead, you'll be mighty disappointed. This version isn't even comparable to the hash. The texture is too mushy and the flavor is too nondescript. You might taste a little bit of salt, but that's about it. You can think of Grace corned beef as the opposite of Goya. Whereas Goya needs to be served warm, Grace is much better when it's cold. Open the can, cut off a slice, and put it directly on your sandwich. That's all you need to do to make a wonderful meal. Even if your sandwich is just bread and corned beef, that's still enough for culinary success. If you warm up this corned beef instead, it won't be completely ruined as it's still easily above average. Grace was founded in Jamaica a century ago. Today, the company and its subsidiaries operate across the Caribbean, UK, and Central and North America. It's one of the most popular brands on the island, and you'll immediately understand why after your very first bite. You may need to grab a map to understand Argentina corned beef. Argentina is just the brand name, as the South American country actually has nothing to do with this product. In fact, this particular brand is owned by Century Pacific Food, which is headquartered in the Philippines. And interestingly enough, Argentina corned beef is made in the United States, which is actually rare in this industry. Meanwhile, Brazil, Argentina's neighbor in South America, is the leading manufacturer of canned corned beef. Once you forget about the geography and let your taste buds take center stage, you'll discover that this corned beef is actually really good. Look for the shredded version if you want a unique treat, as it's firmer and less fatty compared to other brands. And to enhance the flavor, it comes in a delectable sauce that adds an extra savory dose of meatiness.
So meaty.
If you're looking for canned corned beef that tastes like it's homemade, go for Exeter. It comes in a slick retro can and it tastes like the stuff your grandmother used to make. The flavor is a beautiful marriage of beef and salt with nothing else interrupting the proceedings. It even manages to taste fresh, even though it's in a can, and that's especially notable because a lot of the competition on the market tastes extremely processed. A can of Exeter corned beef looks like something that you might find in the back of your grandmother's cupboard, or like a piece in an antique collection. Just make sure that the can says that it's a product of Brazil. If it says that it was made in Argentina, it's a counterfeit, in which case you should eat it only at your own risk. If you want the top store brand of canned corned beef, then head directly to Aldi. That's where you'll find Brookdale's corned beef and corned beef hash. This brand is cheap in price and rich in flavor. The hash may be a little bit better, but neither option will let you down. If you opt for the hash, you owe it to yourself to eat it with eggs. Fry a couple sunny side up and then allow the yolk and the hash to mingle. The resulting combination will be so spectacular that you'll be thinking about it all day. Aldi has a lot of cans on its shelves, and there are a lot of outstanding values to be found. So before you head to one of its stores, be absolutely sure to add this corned beef to your shopping list. If you've ever enjoyed a delicious Jamaican meal that prominently features corned beef and you want to try to replicate the recipe in your own kitchen, then go with the Jamaican Country Styles canned corned beef. This stuff is amazingly rich and has a surprisingly complex flavor profile. The corned beef is salty once it hits your tongue, and then moments later you're met with a flood of savoriness. And before you swallow, you'll be able to detect a pleasing hint of sweetness. If a Jamaican local tells you to try some bully beef, this is the exact sort of thing they're talking about. While there are other options on the market, Jamaican Country Style does it best. This brand has been around for almost 4 decades, and it's completely owned and operated by Jamaicans, although the canned corned beef is produced in Uruguay, a small nation in South America between Brazil and Argentina. We're almost to the very best canned corned beef in the world. Hereford doesn't quite rank #1 on our list, but it's definitely worth trying at least once in your life. It tastes different than every other brand, and the quality is pristine. It's also free of added hormones and contains no MSG or gluten. While lesser brands are known to use fillers, this canned meat is 98% beef. Hereford is a French company that's primarily known for its corned beef, and it's used the same exact recipe for decades. Once you taste it, you may struggle to justify ever switching to another brand. Simply put, the flavor of the beef is top-notch. Comparing other brands to this one would be like comparing a steak at a dirty diner to one at a fancy steakhouse. It's just not even a contest. It's impossible to go wrong when it comes to the canned corned beef made by Libby's. First of all, it's widely available throughout the United States, so it's easy to track down. Second, whether you prefer corned beef or corned beef hash, Libby's has you covered. Both are equally excellent. And finally, this canned meat tastes great if it's hot, cold, or any temperature in between. If a recipe calls for canned corned beef, Libby's is always more than capable of doing a fantastic job. So how did Libby's become the king of the corned beef universe? Experience plays a major part. Since their very beginning back in 1869, the company has focused on canned corned beef. More than 150 years later, it's safe to say that Libby's has mastered the art of this particular canned delicacy.
You like Libby's.
Canned slop or culinary masterpiece. Canned corned beef could be just what you need to spice up your favorite meal. You just gotta know how to cook it. When it comes to canned corned beef, some people have very simple tastes.
I want a can of hash and some coffee.
But let's face facts, it's kind of boring as is. So if you're really looking to kick it up a notch, toss in some fresh ingredients. If you've never had the pleasure of opening a can of this less than visually appetizing meat, just a friendly heads up, it's going to be dense yet mushy and the color will be a bit dull. In other words, it's a
wretched, vile dish of canned slop. That's a can of hash and some coffee.
But you can make it into the most amazing, flavorful, and colorful dish by simply adding a few staple ingredients. The first addition would be to just put an egg on it. A fried egg makes pretty much anything better. Relive St. Patrick's Day and make a hearty mishmash of hash and potatoes O'Brien by adding in some sautéed cabbage or pan-fried potatoes, bell peppers, and onions. If you're feeling like less is more, then just chop up some fresh herbs. While you may want to steer clear from herbs like flat-leaf parsley, try adding some fresh chives or scallions, or even tossing in fresh dill or cilantro. That is, unless cilantro tastes like you're biting into a bar of Irish Spring soap, then it's probably best to avoid it. It would be a grave understatement to say that canned corned beef hash isn't high on the sodium content list. According to the supermarket chain H-E-B, one serving of Hormel's canned corned beef hash contains 870 milligrams of sodium. That's about 36% of your recommended daily intake, in case you needed more numbers to chew on. Lucky for you, there's an incredibly easy workaround so you won't be chugging down water to help dilute your meal.
That's good.
While the following technique is meant for whole pieces of corned beef, the same principle can be applied to the canned version as well. First, empty your can of hash into a bowl and add cold water. Make sure that you loosen the canned corned beef with a spatula or fork so that the water can penetrate into each meaty fiber, and then put the bowl into your refrigerator for an hour or so. Rinse and repeat the process a couple of times. Afterward, give the sodium-reduced hash some time to dry out before tossing it in a pan with hot oil. While this won't remove all of that tasty yet controversial white mineral, it'll definitely tone it down a bit. If this seems like a time-consuming process, well,
all good things to those who wait.
But how can you render the fat off of canned meat, you might be wondering? This is the easiest, though not the most efficient way to remove the excess fat from your hash. Because, let's face it, canned corned beef is not only high in sodium, it also shouldn't be your first or second or third choice when it comes to a low-fat or low-cholesterol meal. Rendering off the fat from canned meats requires a bit of patience, but it's worth it. First, boil the can of corned beef hash and then set the can down on a non-slippery surface. Heat-resistant silicone mats work great. Open the can and pour out the fat that has now magically floated to the top. And
voila!
Your canned corned beef hash has now been rendered, but here's something you should keep in mind. You'll want to dispose of the rendered fat in an aluminum can or heat-proof vessel and let it cool before tossing it. Do not pour it down the drain unless you want to call a plumber, because once the rendered fat cools down, it turns back to a solid. Doesn't sound neat.
Yes, science!
Now, you've rendered as much of the fat from your canned corned beef as possible, but you're still worried about adding fat to get your meaty breakfast of champions super crispy. Well, fret not, dear viewer, because we'd like you to meet your new best friend, the air fryer. These ingenious little tabletop contraptions were invented for those who not only enjoy convenience, but are also constantly looking at their smartwatch because the food is just taking too long to cook.
This is taking way too long.
The air fryer can cook up fried foods in a fraction of their normal cook time. What's even better is that to attain the perfect level of crisp, these gizmos don't need any added fats or oils.
Look! Witchcraft made easy!
No, we know it sounds like sorcery, but you can put down your torches and pitchforks because it's powered by science, not witchcraft. To make crispy canned corned beef hash, all you need to do is spray it with olive or avocado oil, add your canned corned beef hash, and cook it at 370 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 to 20 minutes. Make 3 or 4 indentations in the canned corned beef, and carefully break an egg into each little hash dent. Let the entire thing go for another 4 to 5 minutes, and check out the tasty breakfast you just created. Canned corned beef hash is one of those dishes that seems to take absolutely forever to crisp up. However, there is a method to the crisping madness, which is to cook the hash on both sides, but only long enough so that some of the meaty moisture is cooked off. It seems simple enough, but that still doesn't do anything for the waiting game. And let's face it, when you're waiting for something to cook, it's like watching paint dry or a game of baseball.
Boring!
Cook times typically depend on the type of cookware you're using, as well as the temperature and the amount of hash being prepared. This can be as short a process as 6 to 8 minutes on each side, or up to 25 minutes, for a nice gritty texture. Sadly, regardless of how you like your hash cooked, you're just going to have to suck it up and wait for your delicious meaty breakfast.
Well, that sucks!
Butter isn't always better, and not all oils are created equal, said some chef somewhere, at some point in history. Or maybe it was Benjamin Franklin. Who knows? We're not talking history here. But what we do know for certain is that canned corned beef hash is already well equipped with its own built-in cooking grease, and therefore extra oil isn't really necessary to give it that extra crisp factor. But should you choose to use oil to add that little bit of something, the best type to use would be an oil with a higher burning point. The burning point, also called the smoking point, just means that these oils won't start to smoke until they reach a designated temperature. And no, it's not always at 420 degrees. When it comes to crisping up your canned corned beef breakfast bonanza, you're going to want to stick to oils like vegetable or canola. That's because they can reach a temperature of 400 degrees Fahrenheit to 450 degrees Fahrenheit before they begin to smoke. Butter will burn and has the lowest smoking point at 302 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're looking for a healthier oil, refined coconut oil has a burning point of 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Refined or light olive oil starts burning at 465 degrees Fahrenheit, and refined avocado oil can reach up to 520 degrees Fahrenheit before it will threaten to sound off your smoke alarm. Right off the bat, refrain from using stainless steel to cook your hash. Stainless steel cookware is great, but it doesn't work for all types of food or methods of cookery. Stainless steel pans work well with sauces, caramelization, tomatoes, and wine. However, the same does not apply to most other foods, especially protein-based foods like meat and eggs. This is because chemical bonds are formed between metal atoms and protein particles, which means your breakfast and your stainless steel pan will end up in an embrace that even the mighty vinegar will have a tough time breaking up. Now that you know what not to use, the recommended pan for cooking optimally crispy, crunchy, delectable canned corned beef hash would be a seasoned cast iron skillet. If you don't have one of these hefty pans in your kitchen arsenal, your next best bet would be a Teflon pan. Either works well, so go forth and fry on. You may think that canned corned beef is basically just reserved for breakfast, but that's not the case. All you need is a little something called imagination. Sometimes a kitchen that needs to be restocked is the best instigator for working with what you got. If you're going to a St. Paddy's Day celebration, or any type of party for that matter, you could make a rich and creamy no-cook chip dip that utilizes canned corned beef, sour cream, and Worcestershire sauce. You can also make a casserole with this canned breakfast meat by mixing it with cream of celery soup, potatoes, and a few other kitchen staples, and baking it at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Canned corned beef hash can also be used to make a super tasty stew. All you need to do is add canned crushed tomatoes, sautéed carrots and onions, and some chopped cabbage, and let it simmer on low for a few minutes. Maybe serve it with some cornbread or on a bed of rice. But it's also probably hearty enough on its own. Like some other prominent shelf-stable foods, like its cantastic cousin Spam or even the condiment king ketchup, canned corned beef has also made a name for itself in other foodie cultures. In the Philippines, a famous breakfast dish called corn salog is typically eaten for breakfast. It consists of 3 components: fried eggs, garlic fried rice, and corned beef. The name corn salog is actually a blending of each of the individual dishes combined: corned beef, silagog rice, and itlog. This hearty breakfast can sometimes be served with a few slices of tomatoes.
For your health.
In Jamaica, canned corned beef is known as bully beef, according to the food blog Eat With Your Eyes. It really rose in popularity in the late 1980s after Hurricane Gilbert, the most devastating and destructive storm in Jamaica's history. The storm pretty much obliterated the island. Fresh produce and meat were scarce, if not impossible, to procure, but canned foods were plentiful. This both loved and reviled dish traditionally consists of canned corned beef, bell peppers, onion, garlic, black pepper, thyme, and Scotch bonnet peppers. It's frequently served with rice, boiled unripened bananas, or fried dumplings. Have you ever met a person who didn't enjoy a good taco or burrito? What about breakfast tacos or burritos?
Yes, I have.
Well, forget them. While these two food items typically seem to be divided into Team Taco and Team Burrito, we think it's safe to say that both of them are equally delicious in their own way. And both are quite good at doing their job, filling you up with a hearty, flavorful, and satisfying breakfast. And just in case you were being too productive, a good excuse to take a mid-morning siesta. If you look at canned corned beef hash, it's basically screaming to be folded up in a tortilla or taco shell. It's already been confirmed that it's a suitable breakfast food as is, but when partnered up with its festive BFF, it's a real fiesta in your mouth. Just remind everyone to pace themselves with the tequila. Just because canned corned beef is considered to be a breakfast food doesn't mean that you should only reserve it for first meal of the day burritos or tacos either. Fry it up and serve it with crunchy taco shells, sour cream, pico de gallo, and cilantro or shredded cabbage, and you'll have a very happy tummy. If you're part of Team Burrito, then fry it up with some black beans, finely chopped onion, jalapeno, sour cream, and queso fresco, and you're all set for a nap.
Whether you're in a rush or just can't be bothered, there's one easy solution for a quick fix meal. Whip out a can. But what canned meats should you have in your pantry? You know what they say, go big or go ham. Most canned meats come in small sizes such as 4 ounces or 12 ounces, but you can actually purchase a whole canned 5-pound ham to feed multiple people. Of course, you can also opt for smaller sized cans if you aren't cooking for an entire family. Ham is particularly popular during the holidays. Those glazed ham commercials may run non-stop during Christmas time, but you can eat this canned meat any season or time of the year. Ham can be a side dish or the star of the meal. You can also go sweet or lean toward the savory side.
That'll do, pig. That'll do.
Need some inspiration? Try your hand at making a batch of split pea soup or ham salad with the convenience of canned ham. Or you could jazz up your next Hawaiian pizza by adding chopped canned ham, pineapple, and a dash of hot sauce. Change up the flavors with hickory smoked ham, boneless, water added, gelatin added, and other options. The options don't stop with the ham either. You can create glazes or sauces to truly transform your ham dishes into something spectacular. If you've never tried it, you might be wondering what corned beef actually is. Well, in the most simple terms, it's saltwater preserved beef. Corned beef has been around for centuries, but it really gained popularity in Ireland thanks to the Cattle Acts of 1663 and 1667. It might not be clear from the name itself, but Reubens are corned beef sandwiches, although they can sometimes be made from pastrami. Reuben sandwiches and corned beef and cabbage are two popular ways to use this canned meat, but there's so much more you can do with it. Integrate corned beef into sandwiches or sliders, or rustle up some classic corned beef hash and eggs. This canned food has a rich history and flavor profile that'll mix up even the most basic of meals. If you've ever bought a rotisserie chicken and couldn't finish it before it went bad, you're not alone. There is a solution though. Try canned chicken instead. This is ideal if you don't need a huge serving of chicken or if you're making something just for yourself. You can find whole canned chicken, chunks, shredded, low sodium, and other options to suit your taste buds. The chunky chicken makes for tasty salads, whereas the shredded version is perfect for soups or stews. Since canned chicken is shelf-stable and already cooked, you don't have to worry about bacteria, foodborne illness, or sanitizing your dishes and cooking area. It's really as easy as opening the can, dumping it out, and calling it a day. Indeed, canned chicken might be one of the easiest ways to integrate chicken into your diet. Shake up your pantry meats without taking up a lot of space by adding a few different Spam flavors to your repertoire. Spam was first introduced in 1937 and gained popularity during World War II when the Allies shipped it to troops overseas to keep them fed. The rest is history, and over 9 billion cans have been sold so far. Spam is a pork and ham blend with salt, water, modified potato starch, sugar, and sodium nitrate. Whether you're a longtime fan or a rookie, there are plenty of ways to eat it. You can slice it, cube it, grill it, fry it, bake it. And whether you open a new can or have Spam to spare, it can be eaten at any time of the day for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and beyond. Besides the classic flavor, Spam comes in a range of options you might not have tried or even knew existed. There's maple-flavored, hickory smoke, jalapeno, teriyaki, less sodium, and more. There's even an option made with lean white turkey. Speaking of which…
Gobble, gobble! Tommy Gobbler's back, and he wants to hear what you turkeys are thankful for!
Canned turkey is an ideal pantry staple thanks to its ease of use. You can use it exactly how you might integrate any chopped turkey into a dish. As far as options go, there's white meat turkey, white and dark together, oven roasted, and others to pick from. The canned versions usually come in chunks though, so keep that in mind for your recipes. For the most part, you can't cut canned turkey into thin slices like you'd find in a deli, but you could absolutely make anything in which the turkey needs to be chopped or minced. Grind your canned meat to make a hearty turkey tomato bolognese for your next pasta dish, or integrate it into turkey chili for a quick weeknight meal, or create soups, stews, or stocks with the meat. And canned turkey already comes cooked, so you can feel free to adapt recipe cooking times with that in mind. Better yet, canned turkey is low in fat and carbohydrates, but high in protein, making it a solid item to incorporate into your pantry. Comfort meals just got a whole lot easier. It helps that there's quite an assortment when it comes to canned beef, so you can use it for stews, casseroles, sandwiches, and more. Like other canned meats, beef comes fully cooked, so you can easily open it and add it to your next meal. They're great to bring on camping trips too, since they add a heap of heartiness without much effort. There's no prep work, cleanup is easy, and ultimately it beefs up the protein in your food. Just remember to season your beef like you would any other food. Both you and your pantry will love having canned ground beef added to the mix. No need to thaw a batch from the freezer or cook a batch before it goes bad. Even better, you won't have to throw away old, gray, dubious-looking meat from your fridge. It's so easy to open a can for your sauce, meatloaf, spaghetti, any kind of pasta dish, chili, tacos, casseroles, soups, and stews. Most canned ground beef comes with the meat and a bit of salt, allowing you to season it to your liking. Since it often comes as a blank slate, you can add garlic, onion, chili powder, paprika, or anything your heart desires. Ground beef is extremely versatile. For example, you can open a can of ground beef, add some beans and vegetables, and call it a day. Or you could bake some potatoes and season the ground beef, beans, and veggies to create a chili, and then place it on top of your potatoes. The sky's the limit. Who doesn't love a good meatball? And now you don't have to do the grunt work yourself. You know the drill. Ordinarily, you'd add spices and mush the raw meat all together with your bare hands. Then you have to roll them into their classic ball shape and cook them. Thanks to canned meatballs, you can completely eliminate that process, or at least do it less often. They'll also stay fresh in your pantry until you're ready to whip something up.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball!
Canned meatballs might come in tomato sauce or gravy, so they're seasoned and ready for you to add to your next pasta dish. Boil a quick pot of spaghetti and then add the meatballs, and you are done. And don't forget to season things up with some oregano, garlic, and Parmesan cheese. Overall, canned meatballs are an absolutely fantastic choice for an effortless meal. Elk is somewhat similar in taste to beef, but it's even leaner and can be a little gamey. They are a part of the deer family, though a few elk subspecies exist, including Rocky Mountain elk and Roosevelt elk. Since it's wild game meat, you can use elk like you would deer, bison, or rabbit. This is a great item to add to your pantry if you're looking to mix things up or want to experiment with ingredients, since it's not as popular as other types of meat. Elk is low in fat, high in protein, and also contains vitamins B2, B3, calcium, copper, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, selenium, as well as zinc. You can make stews, soups, or roast elk from the canned contents. Since canned elk meat isn't as popular or prevalent as other meats, the options are pretty straightforward. Fry it in a pan or grill it to add depth of flavor, and season it like you would any other game meat or beef. The origin of haggis might be a bit muddy, but one thing is for sure, it has been around for a very long time. Haggis is most known as a Scottish savory pudding that might contain liver, heart, lungs, minced meat, suet, oatmeal, and spices, among other ingredients. There's quite a range, and every recipe looks a little different. When it comes to canned haggis, there are a few meat versions to pick from. You might see haggis with lamb heart, lamb liver, pork fat, Highland beef, sirloin beef, suet, oats, onion, or other flavors. It depends on both the brand and the country of origin. Either way, there's likely to be a pretty equal amount of fat, carbohydrates, and proteins in canned haggis. Notably, you can also buy vegetarian haggis, which is made with kidney beans, lentils, turnips, and other ingredients. For a hearty and easy breakfast, open up the canned haggis and serve with canned beans, mushrooms, eggs, and sausage. Or opt for a more traditional method by serving your haggis with mashed potatoes and yellow turnips. Old William Wallace would be proud.
That they may take our lives, but they'll never take
for freedom!
If you're unsure how to integrate Vienna sausage into your next meal, just keep things simple. You can use it like you would any other kind of hot dog or sausage. For example, put a spin on sausage and peppers and fry it with onion, bell pepper, and other vegetables. Or put it in soups or stews. Or chop some up to include in your next batch of pasta for a delicious comfort meal. They're a convenient addition to any pantry. Vienna sausage usually contains a combination of pork and beef. It might be longer than a hot dog if you buy it fresh, but the canned version comes in smaller pieces. You might also see canned versions made of chicken, beef, and pork in chicken broth. The flavors allow you to pick and choose how you want it to taste. And you can get smoked, barbecue, jalapeno, or classic original versions of this ingredient. You can make a quick and tasty meal with canned pork. Simply open, heat, and eat. Most stores will offer canned pork meat, pulled pork, pork chunks, and other varieties. Some come with just the pork and salt, no preservatives, and are fully cooked, while other canned options might come in water or barbecue sauce. Canned pork and sea salt contains a good amount of protein, a low amount of fat, and no carbs. Since pork is so versatile, this canned meat can be a valuable addition to any pantry. Heat it in a pan with the liquid to keep it moist, or drain it if you're making something that won't need the excess moisture, and pair it with rice or creamy mashed potatoes. You can also make a barbecued pulled pork sandwich with a loaf of crunchy, crusty bread. The 14.5-ounce cans are an ideal choice for family meals or leftovers since they're larger, but there are smaller canned versions as well. Level up your next meal or snack with a can of pork pâté. Pâté is a savory paste made from ground and seasoned meat or seafood, in this case, pork. It is often served with bread or crackers, dried fruit, or cheese. One of the most common canned options is pork liver pâté. The flavor tends to speak for itself, but sometimes it has other additions, such as mushrooms, goose meat, and black pepper. Notably, many pâtés are imported from France. Unlike other canned meats, you don't have to do anything with a pâté. It's best served and enjoyed as is, although you can always stuff it into veggies or spread a little onto your next sandwich. It's also the perfect addition to a date night or a picnic. And the best thing is that it's nowhere near as expensive as you might think. Why not give it a go?
You say tomato, we say check this out before you buy another can. Like them organic, from Italy, or not tasting like metal. We ranked 16 canned tomato brands from worst to first, with a top 5 that's quite appealing. Contadina launched in 1918 with California-grown tomatoes that tasted like the ones in Italy. Today, the company's fresh Roma tomatoes are non-GMO and packaged in non-BPA cans.
Just mix and in minutes, delicious homemade sauce.
But some of Contadina's line is packed with the tomato peel, like their fire-roasted and crushed tomatoes. We're not fans of having to strain the tomatoes to remove the bitter skins, and then losing some of the tomato pulp. Though most Contadina products contain only fruit sugars, the taste is unnaturally sweet compared to other brands. That oddly candied flavor landed this one last on our list. We had high hopes for Hunt's. The company has been packaging tomatoes from California since 1888 and uses 100% of every fruit. They offer dozens of options, including diced, whole, and crushed, along with a line of meal starters.
Having Hunt's in your cupboard is like having your own tomato garden.
Hunt's products feature fresh tomatoes that are steam peeled to remove the skins. Still, while tasting Hunt's diced tomatoes, we notice an oddly bitter metallic taste masking the tomato flavor. The fruit texture was firm, but the tomatoes didn't break down when cooking, which isn't great for sauce. Hunt's landed at number 15 for its bitter metal taste. Walmart's Great Value brand is often a reliable bargain, and their Great Value tomatoes come in every style imaginable, including salsa, fire-roasted, and even an organic line. The company states that the tomatoes are picked and packaged on the same day for optimal freshness. But when we tried them, the tomatoes lacked any notable depth of rich flavor. The ratio of juice to tomatoes was higher than in other brands and tasted thin and watery. Though we love a good deal, the overall weak taste earns Great Value a solid number 14. Del Monte has been hustling canned veggies since 1886. Today, in addition to offering tomatoes as crushed, diced, paste, and sauce, the company is also known for its canned stewed tomatoes. These tomatoes add a rich, slow-cooked flavor to stews and sauces. Del Monte's tomatoes are indeed flavorful, but several of their products feature high sugar and sodium, with some listing high fructose corn syrup. While sugar is sometimes necessary to cut the tomato's natural acidity, we prefer adding it ourselves, landing Del Monte at number 13. Carl Rotelle introduced his canned tomato and green chili combo to Texans in 1943, and by the early 60s, Rotelle tomatoes were available nationwide. A can of Rotelle is also an essential ingredient in homemade queso. The tomato and green chili pepper combo adds that signature heat and tang, but the brand comes in at number 12 on our list because the green chili peppers incorporated into every product limits their use to recipes that call for a spicy kick. In 1896, 3 wholesalers in San Francisco joined forces to create S&W Premium Foods, and over 125 years later, they're still on the beat. The brand features crushed, ready-cut, petite diced, and stewed, but stewed tomato recipes don't often include sugar, which S&W adds in the form of high fructose corn syrup. Still, S&W hits at number 11 because we're into their other options, like their Italian recipe crushed tomatoes. Along with dried oregano and basil, S&W adds black pepper and anise, giving the tomatoes a peppery, herbal fennel note, which is mighty delicious. Creating canned tomatoes that taste great while being good for the environment is Muir Glen's manifesto. All of their products are non-GMO and USDA organic certified, using only organic produce, herbs, and seasonings. Of course, that quality comes at a price. Compared to other organic producers, Muir Glen is among the most expensive domestic tomato brands you can buy. The company sets its sights on an extensive list of offerings, including over a dozen fire-roasted flavors, which makes a delicious charred tomato salsa. While the large organic selection is impressive, the overall taste is comparable to other less expensive options. Given that the brand costs more than others, Muir Glen gets a number 10 ranking. Kroger's USA-grown, non-GMO tomatoes are available in various options, including fire-roasted, chili-ready, and the standards like crushed and diced, with lower prices than most name brands.
Crushed tomato and fresh basil. Hold.
Kroger fire-roasted diced tomatoes served spicy, savory, and smoky flavor, but some of the peels had a charred taste that added a campfire vibe, but also brought a slight bitterness to the tomatoes. They weren't exactly the best, but the quality was better than many name brands, especially for the price. For that, Kroger got a solid number 9. Private Selection is Kroger's gourmet line. All sorts of goodies fall under the label, along with San Marzano-style whole-peeled tomatoes with basil. They're not Italy certified San Marzano tomatoes, but they feature a rich, freshly harvested flavor enhanced by fresh basil. The whole tomatoes were mostly intact, nestled in a thick and flavorful tomato juice. Though the flavor can't compete with authentic San Marzanos, Private Selection provides a great-tasting tomato product at an affordable price compared to many Italian counterparts, ranking this one a number 8. We all love Costco house brand products, and Kirkland Signature's diced tomatoes come with an easy-to-open pop top for roughly $1 per can. While the diced tomatoes have a fresh flavor, some cans have bits of green or yellow tomatoes. The color indicates the fruit was packaged before it was fully ripe, keeping Kirkland Signature a number 7 on our list. Costco also stocks certified San Marzano tomatoes throughout the year, which again makes Kirkland Signature a solid bet. The Costco line also features basil leaf, which adds depth to the overall flavor. We love the taste of DeLallo canned tomatoes. The specialty Italian grocer started in Pennsylvania in 1950, and today it produces more than 200 Italian and Italian-style products, including olives, pasta, and canned tomatoes from fruit grown in Italy and California. DeLallo San Marzano certified tomatoes are packaged whole by law and never crushed or diced. The ingredients are simple: tomatoes, juice, and one of the lowest amounts of salt we tried. There was a balance between the rich juice and tender fruit, with minimal seeds and 0 peels.
At the heart of every great Italian meal are just a few simple ingredients.
This one's the priciest in our ranking, knocking it out of the top 5. Still, these tomatoes had a homegrown freshness, with meaty sweetness and balanced acidity that was heavenly in a garlic and herb tomato sauce. Making organic, plant-based foods accessible to all is the mission of Take Root Organics. With an eye on affordability, the company's prices are in line with many typically less expensive, non-organic name brands. Options from the brand are limited, offering only a handful of common cuts, including diced and crushed, with a few available without added salt. But those with salt still had some of the lowest amounts of sodium that we tried. The tomatoes tasted fresh, clean, and authentic. The diced tomatoes had a firm texture straight out of the can, perfect in a pot of chicken chili. While we wish Take Root Organics offered more products, their overall quality lands the brand in our top 5. Colavita has Italian pantry staples on lock. Starting in Italy in 1938, the company began exporting its products worldwide in 1979, including its Colavita Premium Selection, one of the best olive oils for cooking. Since tomatoes appear in many Italian meals, adding a line of tomato products was a natural move. Offerings include USDA certified organic and commercially grown options, including San Marzano certified tomatoes. Colavita San Marzano tomatoes grow in volcanic soils, creating plump fruit that is naturally sweet, juicy, and meaty. The company packages its tomato products with only tomatoes, juice, and citric acid. With a rich ruby red color, very low sodium and sugar, and an authentic tomato taste, the brand comes in hot at number 4. Low price and high quality puts Red Gold tomatoes at 3rd place on our list. The family-owned company began in Indiana in 1942, proving that the state is one of the best places to grow some killer tomatoes.
These other brands, they don't compare to Red Gold.
They do look better.
I know.
Today, the company's line features non-GMO, kosher-friendly, and gluten-free ingredients. The sodium and sugar content are also lower than many other brands. Aside from the attention to detail in crafting the product, the tomatoes taste tangy, fresh, and fruity. The juice and fruit had a bright red color and zesty tomato flavor, making for a delicious meal any day of the week. Muti canned tomatoes are some of the best we sampled. Still trucking along since 1899, all Muti tomatoes are grown sustainably from non-GMO seeds in Italy. The Italian brand certified Pomodoro San Marzano balances sweetness and tanginess with a firm texture that practically melted into a marinara sauce. The whole peeled San Marzano tomatoes feature only tomatoes and juice and nothing else. Above all, Muti delivers a fresh-from-the-vine, flavorful tomato that balances sweet fruitiness with fresh acidity, earning it the number 2 spot on our list. Finally, the top tomato. Italian import Cento tomatoes offer an extensive range of organic and commercial tomatoes, including certified authentic San Marzanos. The brand's ingredient lists are also short, typically featuring only tomatoes.
It actually smells pretty good.
Using puree instead of juice gives the liquid a concentrated flavor and texture, and whole peeled tomatoes released a freshly picked tomato aroma when cracked open. Though San Marzanos are known for having low acidity, they still offered a nice tart bite. More affordable than other brands for the high quality, Cento tomatoes offered a delicious, straight-from-the-garden taste. The flavor alone landed Cento at our number 1.
Just about every kid has at least one memory of finding a tuna sandwich in their lunchbox. This canned fish has been a pantry staple for decades, but in recent years has declined in popularity. Let's take a look at canned tuna's history, benefits, and why it's on the decline. Just like a lot of other foods, how expensive canned tuna is can be more or less a marketing ploy. Simply grabbing the can of tuna with the highest price tag could be a mistake for environmentally conscious shoppers. There are other ways to tell if your canned tuna is sustainably caught, such as making sure to buy the correct variety of tuna and doing a little research on the company to ensure the tuna is not overfished from endangered populations. As it turns out, pole and line fishing and trolling are 2 sustainable methods for catching tuna because they're the closest methods to one fisherman with a rod catching tuna. And while these methods can yield expensive results, an expensive can of tuna does not automatically mean the tuna was caught with these more sustainable methods. That tuna may just have a fancy sticker and a great marketing campaign behind its higher price tag. Tuna is notorious for its high mercury levels in all forms, and tuna from a can is no exception. While you likely don't have to worry too much about mercury content unless you are pregnant, the biomagnification of mercury in tuna may be worth thinking about. Biomagnification occurs when tuna fish eat smaller animals with high levels of mercury, ultimately amplifying the amount of mercury in tuna. As a result, health experts recommend pregnant women eat no more than 1 can or 12 ounces of tuna a week to avoid a high dose of mercury, which can cause abnormalities in a developing baby.
It's really bad for pregnant mothers, young kids who have a developing brain.
This is essentially the same as the recommendation that pregnant women avoid sushi. Ultimately, the FDA's official position recommends pregnant and breastfeeding women are careful about their fish consumption, so being pregnant does not necessarily mean you have to swear off tuna salad forever. Major tuna brands like Bumblebee and Chicken of the Sea offer tons of canned tuna options. Even if you have lived your whole life thinking you hate canned tuna, there may just be a product out there for you. For instance, some canned tuna is oil-packed, while some is packed in water or even vinegar. There is also chunk tuna, which means it contains various pieces of the fish mixed together. Essentially, this is the opposite of solid tuna that includes one complete filleted section of tuna that is whole yet still flaky. Solid canned tuna is more expensive, but it's also generally preferred. Canned tuna can even come pre-seasoned in bags for on-the-go consumption. Canned tuna has been around for a long time, maybe longer than you would expect. Tuna canning became popular in the United States in the early 1900s as companies were looking for a substitute for tinned sardines.
In the 1950s, the French sardine company started working under the brand name of Starkist for their individual tuna products.
Very quickly, canned tuna became one of the most popular preserved meat products for American consumers, with about 300 million pounds of the canned ocean fish imported into the U.S. each year. Most canned tuna comes from Asia, including Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. But some canned tuna is also shipped to the U.S. from South American countries like Ecuador. Tuna is not generally caught or packaged within the U.S. because the fish is not super available in the nearby oceans. As it turns out, tuna's original success with American consumers came because, as a fish, it doesn't actually have a particularly fishy taste, and its white color is more reminiscent of chicken. And of course, effective advertising.
Pardon me. Yeah? I want to interview a tuna. Are you a tuna? No, I'm an octopus.
Fish is popular with American consumers in part because the food has a high volume of omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids are beneficial for many reasons. These fatty acids have been shown to improve eye and brain health, reduce the risk of heart disease, fight inflammation, and may even prevent mental health issues like depression, anxiety, and ADHD. That said, if you're looking to take in the highest concentration of omega-3 fatty acids, you may be better off sticking with another fish like sardines or salmon, or better yet, simply taking the omega-3 fatty acids as daily fish oil supplements. Sardines and salmon have a higher concentration of omega-3 fatty acids than tuna, and thus may have more health benefits for consumers. Although canned tuna may not have as many omega-3 fatty acids as some of the other fish it shares the ocean with, tuna can be a great source of vitamin D, which might be hard to find if you live somewhere that doesn't get much sunshine. Additionally, tuna has a low fat concentration, low cholesterol, and low sodium. For its nutritional value, tuna is also relatively inexpensive. One can of tuna is generally less than $2, and you might even stretch a single can for 2 meals. And unlike canned beef or pork products, canned tuna is going to offer a higher nutrient-to-cost ratio. While canned tuna isn't gourmet, if you're on a budget, it's not a bad idea to throw a few cans in your grocery cart. Atlantic Natural Foods makes a plant-based seafood alternative to canned tuna called Tuno. Tuno comes in a can just like tuna, but is made of plant protein. While many plant-based alternatives to meat can be delicious and health-conscious choices, Tuno is probably not the greatest alternative. It's artificially fishy tasting and has a bizarre texture that is a little off-putting. There is also a trend of using watermelon as a tuna alternative because its pink color and juicy texture can match that of fresh raw tuna. While it is creative, the watermelon tuna trend probably is not the best alternative for real canned tuna. Until a better alternative comes along, real tuna is going to be your best bet over a plant-based alternative. Because overfishing can deplete the ocean's resources and lead to declining fish populations, it's important to prioritize eating sustainably sourced fish to maintain our access to those fish in the long term. Which brands? Well, things can get a bit murky when claiming which use sustainably sourced methods and which don't. The bottom line is that not every company uses the same practices, and some go beyond others in their efforts. Companies who do get high grades from industry watchdogs are Whole Foods Market's 365 canned tuna, American Tuna, and Wild Planet. They, according to those in the know, are dedicated to safe and sustainable fishing practices and protecting the Earth's oceans so that future generations can enjoy canned tuna. Despite canned tuna's rapid rise in popularity throughout the 1900s, in recent years, tuna consumption has declined, and consumers are opting against the canned fish. Starting in the mid-1980s, canned tuna sales began declining, and current consumption rates are as low as they once were in the 1970s. Fears about mercury poisoning and sustainability concerns have stifled the reign of the tuna fish, leaving consumers feeling disillusioned from the canned meal.
They want to know that it comes from a fishery or a farm that is producing responsibly. They don't want their seafood to be associated with illegal activity.
Tuna has become milquetoast and associated with boring school lunches for most American consumers. Fears about tuna toxicity and bad press about tuna fisheries being responsible for mass killings of dolphins have also led to the downfall of tuna consumption. Tuna aren't just big, they're downright massive. The biggest bluefin tuna ever caught was a whopping 1,496 pounds in October of 1997 by Captain Eric Sampson. While that monster tuna dwarfs some of its smaller contemporaries, bluefin tuna are very big fish with almost robotic features. An adult bluefin tuna will grow up to 500 pounds, which means one tuna will produce a lot of cans of tuna, like a whole supermarket shelf's worth. Not only are bluefin tuna monstrously large, they can command a fortune at market. For example, in 2019, a single bluefin tuna sold for $3.1 million. This one should probably be a given, but surprisingly, it's not. There is nothing fresh about canned tuna, as much as American consumers might want to think there is. Canning is, of course, a preservation method. It's a strategy for giving fish a long-lasting shelf life, which is useful for keeping protein around as a pantry staple, either for school lunches or when you are on your last meal in between grocery trips. That said, tuna are caught long in advance of when they make it into your pantry in the form of a canned good. So if you are looking for fresh fish, you'll be better off sticking with sashimi and poke rather than a preserved can of solid white albacore packed in water.
Not all clam chowder is canned equal. We tried everything from award winners to store brands, and you won't believe which chowder is the champ. Keep watching for our definitive ranking from worst to best. Cole's New England clam chowder is so bad that it's actually shocking to your senses if you make the mistake of trying it. This canned soup tastes like a combination of stagnant lake water, old onion soup, and decomposing fish guts.
It's good.
The good news is that Cole's clam chowder can't get any worse. No matter how they switch up their recipe, it can only improve. One taste of great value clam chowder and you'll understand why a MASH'd survey found that this Walmart brand is regarded as the worst private label of them all. This soup is so gross that you wouldn't even consider feeding it to your cat. No living being should be forced to eat this. The first problem you'll notice is that this soup has way too many potato chunks. A more appropriate name for it would be potato chowder, because spuds are sure to be swimming in each and every scoop. The other glaring problem is the overwhelming and inescapable saltiness. It's like they accidentally tripled or quadrupled the amount of salt that needed to be in the chowder. Why does Walmart add so much salt? It's probably to hide the other shortcomings of this culinary abomination. When you think of states known for yummy clam chowder, you probably think of states on the East Coast. However, if you look hard enough, you can also find fantastic clam chowder on the other side of the United States. Regrettably, Ivar's Puget Sound-style clam chowder isn't an example of the best the West Coast has to offer. To be fair, Ivar's has restaurant locations that serve delicious clam chowder. However, when this company cans its clam chowder, something goes terribly wrong. Every ounce of flavor that's found at the restaurants is lost, and all that is left is a bunch of mushy sadness. To add to the misery, Ivar's clam chowder was once recalled due to fears of sharp pieces of plastic being in the soup. With that in mind, just stay away. Some soups are bad, but this one has a history of being actively dangerous. If all you know is New England clam chowder, do yourself a favor and try Manhattan clam chowder. It's quite different, but it can be just as scrumptious. While New England clam chowder is typically white due to the addition of cream, Manhattan clam chowder doesn't have cream. Instead, this version is packed with tomatoes and veggies like celery and carrots. This version of the soup tends to be reddish in color because tomatoes make things red. While Progresso knows how to make excellent New England clam chowder, don't be fooled into thinking that all their clam chowders are winners. Progresso's Manhattan Manhattan clam chowder is a subpar example of this style. It's too watery and the clam pieces are way too rubbery. Eating the clams in this chowder is about as fun as gnawing on the eraser of your pencil. Campbell's sells more than $8 billion worth of soup a year, according to food processing, and has a product line that features dozens of varieties, some of which are the best in their category. But the unfortunate truth is that their New England clam chowder isn't very good. It's far from the worst soup on this list, but it's not anything you should be purchasing on a regular basis. Of Campbell's New England offerings, the home-style New England clam chowder is the best, but it will still leave you wanting something else. First of all, the lack of clams can't be ignored. You'll spoon through the soup looking for clams, but you won't be able to find many. Second of all, the potatoes are a major letdown. They have an unappetizing grittiness and virtually no flavor. Generally speaking, Campbell's is a trustworthy name in the soup universe, but just say no when it comes to their New England clam chowder. You can do so much better. Unlike other soups on this list, Stonewall Kitchen New England clam chowder is made in small quantities and has soft pieces of delectable clams. Sadly, that's where the positives end and the problems begin. This clam chowder has little to no spice or flavor of note, which makes it an extremely bland experience. If you buy Stonewall Kitchen New England clam chowder, just know that you are going to need to add ingredients to make it flavorful enough. Thankfully, if you add enough cream, butter, salt, pepper, and herbs of your choice, it can become quite tasty. If you're feeling lucky, go ahead and purchase a can of the Black Pearl clam chowder. It's expensive, but if things go your way, you're in for some of the best clam chowder you've ever eaten. On the other side of the coin, you're in for a world of disappointment if you get unlucky. What's the deciding factor? It's all up to the amount of clams you find in your soup. Basically, opting for this brand is a dangerous gamble.
I'm going after the Black Pearl.
If you don't want to roll the dice, just go to the Black Pearl, a restaurant in Newport, Rhode Island. This highly rated eatery has splendid clam chowder that is reliably delicious. Although Snow's New England clam chowder won't be the best clam chowder you'll ever have the pleasure of eating, this stuff is decidedly above average. Every can of this clam chowder tastes exactly like the previous can, which is impressive considering that Snow's has been making this soup for more than 100 years. If you grew up eating it, you'll be happy to learn that it tastes the same as you remember. While Snow's also sells condensed clam chowder, the cans you should buy say ready to serve on them. As that phrase indicates, you don't need to add any water, cream, or milk. You don't need to even add any salt or pepper. Simply heat it in a saucepan on your stove or pop it in the microwave for a couple of minutes and prepare your taste buds for a consistently tasty treat. If you want Manhattan clam chowder that allows the clams to take center stage and be the star of the show, look no further than Chincoteague Seafood Manhattan clam chowder. From the first bite until the very last mouthful, you'll revel in the glorious flavor of clams. The flavor is so fresh that you'll be convinced that the clams were plucked out of the ocean just minutes earlier.
Good soup.
Chincoteague Seafood Manhattan clam chowder also has a lot of other fresh-tasting ingredients playing supporting roles, including tomatoes, carrots, celery, sweet peppers, and onions. This dark red clam chowder smells great and tastes even better. Boudin San Francisco Wharf clam chowder is crafted in the Bay Area, and it's so tasty that it is sure to make even New Englanders fall head over heels for it. The potatoes in particular are perfect in terms of taste and texture and are the optimal match for the clam flavor. To taste Boudin San Francisco clam chowder at its absolute best, you need to eat it out of a sourdough bread bowl, or at least dip pieces of sourdough bread into it. That elevates it from a really good soup to unforgettable clam chowder.
What's the deal with the bread bowl? I never had a bread bowl before either.
The Great Chowder Cook-Off has been an annual event in Newport, Rhode Island for 4 decades. Each year, a world champion is crowned in the category of Best Clam Chowder. 3 times, Tony's Clam Chowder won the coveted title as the world champion of clam chowder. A single spoonful of this majestic soup is all you'll need to agree that this is indeed some next-level stuff that richly deserves its spot in the top 5 of our ranking. What makes Tony's Clam Chowder stand out from the competition is its supersized peppery kick. The black pepper in the recipe adds just enough spice to keep you on your toes as you enjoy all of its inherent clam chowder goodness. Even if the thought of spicy foods scares you, don't fret, because there's enough gentle creaminess to cool off your tongue before you dig in for your next mouthful of award-winning greatness.
I do believe now that this is probably one of the greatest chowders in history, and I'm really proud of that.
If you want voluptuous Manhattan clam chowder that's thick in all the right places, reach for a can of Campbell's Chunky Manhattan Clam Chowder. As the name implies, this chowder has unmistakably large pieces of clams, potatoes, tomatoes, carrots, celery, red bell peppers, and green bell peppers.
Let's fuel up with some chunky soup. Woo! Woo! Let's go, baby!
As mentioned previously, Campbell's doesn't have a New England clam chowder that is worth buying. This Manhattan clam chowder, though, is easily good enough to be the only soup of its kind that you ever buy, because it's so easy to find on your local grocer's shelves. Progresso makes multiple varieties of New England clam chowder. While there is nothing wrong with their traditional version or any of the other varieties, the one you need to get your hands on is the rich and hearty version. First, the creamy texture is matched by a creamy flavor with plenty of soft, juicy clams and firm, hearty potatoes. Add it all together, and it's fair to say that Progresso Rich and Hearty New England clam chowder is the best widely available canned clam chowder. If you're willing to put in the effort to track down a can of this stuff, Bar Harbor New England Clam Chowder is without a doubt the best canned clam chowder you can find anywhere. While it's not as ubiquitous as the soups made by Progresso and Campbell's, it's definitely worth going the extra mile or two. In fact, not only is this the best clam chowder, it's one of the best canned soups of any kind. Bar Harbor has called Maine home since 1917, and their dedication to excellence can be tasted in each can of their clam chowder. Most canned soups can't compare to restaurant-quality soups that are prepared from scratch, but Bar Harbor New England clam chowder is one of the few that can. Not only does it compare to the quality you'd find at a fancy seafood restaurant, it surpasses what most restaurants are capable of making. From the clams so fresh they'll bite back, to the mouth-watering tender potatoes and everything in between, this clam chowder is the best of the best in each category.
Should you drain canned tuna? Technically, you don't have to drain the water or oil from a can of tuna to enjoy it. Most people don't enjoy soggy sandwiches though, so draining your tuna is the common sense solution to that problem. But draining tuna is beneficial for more than just removing excess liquid. It has a nutritional impact too. Tuna packed in oil, for instance, has twice the amount of calories as tuna packed in water. According to the USDA, a can of tuna in oil has a whopping 317 calories compared to the 150 calories from tuna in water. Both water and oil-packed tuna also contain sodium, which can be reduced by eliminating the liquid. According to Home Cook World, you have 3 options for draining tuna. The first is opening a small hole in the can, flipping it upside down to let the liquid out. The second involves removing the lid from the can, placing it back on, and squeezing both sides of the can to expel as much oil or water as possible. The third technique is as simple as dumping the canned tuna into a colander. Note that you may need to press down on the fish to get out excess liquid. Take a second to think before you throw out that dusty tuna can in your pantry or that opened tuna you stored in the fridge a few days ago. Some of us tend to be squeamish when it comes to seafood, so it's no wonder tuna is often tossed too soon for fear of it going bad.
I'm in fish.
Oh, that's where the smell is coming from.
The good news is, canned tuna can be stored in the pantry for up to 5 years, according to the USDA. The best place to store it is in a cool, dry place away from sunlight. However, if you are catching and canning your own tuna, you shouldn't keep it for more than a year. But what about the leftover tuna you put in the fridge? The North Carolina Division of Public Health recommends storing tuna in an airtight container in the refrigerator for up to 3 days. The same holds true for tuna salad. You can enjoy those delicious sandwiches for 3 whole days. However, if you added the canned tuna to a casserole or cooked dish, you can safely store the leftovers in the freezer for up to 2 months. You may want to rethink the location of your tuna stash if it is stored above your stove or on open shelves near a light source. Foods can be spoiled or degraded by both heat and light. The University of Minnesota Extension recommends not exposing canned goods to temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. High temperatures increase the risk of food spoilage, but even temperatures of 75 degrees Fahrenheit and above can cause nutrients to be lost. Tuna should be stored in a cool, dry area below 85 degrees Fahrenheit, preferably between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, to keep it in its prime. According to the National Fisheries Institute, room temperature is the ideal temperature. Temperature and light are important factors in proper tuna storage, but they are not the only factors. To prevent crushed or rusting cans, the Institute recommends storing canned fish on a shelf instead of the floor. Despite what you might have heard, refrigerating leftover food in a can does not pose a food safety risk. According to the USDA, refrigerating food in a can after it is opened is perfectly safe, but it may affect its quality and flavor. Hence, the agency recommends sealing leftovers in plastic or glass containers. It is important to note, however, that the safety concerns about bisphenol A, more commonly known as BPA, aren't entirely unfounded, according to Epicurious. The chemical is used inside the lining of metal cans and in many food storage containers. Newsweek reports that the chemical mimics estrogen and is associated with diabetes, cognitive issues, and fertility issues. Canned tuna, on average, contains about 140 nanograms per gram of BPA, according to a Tuna. It would take 25 cans of tuna to exceed the EU's maximum guideline for this additive. The presence of BPA at this low concentration is considered harmless. However, according to the Environmental Defense Fund, Americans take in 5,000 times the amount of BPA that the European Food Safety Authority considers safe. That may be reason enough to look for BPA-free cans. Essentially, the best reasons for transferring your leftover tuna to another container are to protect your fridge from taking on a fishy smell and to preserve the quality of the fish. Compared to fresh foods, canned foods contain more sodium. On average, canned tuna contains 247 milligrams of sodium per 3-ounce serving, according to Healthline. That amount is a little more than 10% of the Centers for Disease Control's recommended dietary reference intake for sodium, which is 2,300 milligrams per day. If you're on a low-sodium diet, this is concerning. When buying tuna, look for low-sodium varieties. It sounds easy, doesn't it? But according to Live Strong, labels can be tricky. You may think that tuna packed in water, for example, is just tuna and water. That often isn't the case when you examine the list of ingredients where you'll find salt was added. You should instead look for labels that state no salt added, low sodium, or reduced sodium.
I know it's tuna, but it says chicken by the sea.
Don't worry if you can't find reduced sodium tuna at the grocery store. An American Dietetic Association study found that rinsing canned tuna in water for 3 minutes reduces sodium content by 80%. Is it possible to eat too much tuna? As far as the Food and Drug Administration is concerned, the answer is yes.
Nothing's ever worked out for me with tuna on toast.
The same is true for all fish, not just tuna. The FDA recommends eating 2 to 3 servings or 8 to 12 ounces of cooked fish per week. But what's the problem? Fish, after all, is packed with vitamins, minerals, and omega-3 fatty acids. However, the thing to watch out for is mercury. While canned light tuna is a low-mercury option you can enjoy 2 to 3 servings of, albacore tuna is higher in mercury and should only be enjoyed once a week. It may seem that canned food can survive anything, including the apocalypse, but that's not the case. Take note of dates, dents, bulges, rust, and leaks. When it comes to the product date, it's more about food quality, not an indicator of food safety, per the USDA. Cans have a sell-by, use-by, or best-by date on them. Ideally, you'll use canned foods before the best-by date, but if some time has passed, it's still safe to eat as long as the smell and color are still normal. The sell-by date is helpful for grocery stores and is usually years from when you find the can on the shelf.
Good for the tuna.
Once you've confirmed the date is still valid, look for signs of damage to the can. A leak is serious enough to throw the can away. Bulges or rust may also indicate leaks, especially when they're near the seams. That means any can that's bulging or rusty gets tossed straight into the trash bin too. As far as dents are concerned, small ones aren't necessarily a problem. However, the USDA recommends discarding cans with dents that are large enough to sit your finger in. For those concerned about sustainability, it's important to know where your tuna comes from and which fishing methods were used to get it. In the 1980s, these issues came to the forefront when the public became aware that dolphins were dying as bycatch in the tuna nets per canned tuna. Fisheries began using fish aggregating devices to minimize dolphin bycatch, but unfortunately other fish species are aggregated and caught along with the tuna.
Salmon swim against the current, and the tuna swim with it.
Still, the dolphin safe label is important to many people. The standards to use the label are that no dolphins are killed while fishing for tuna, and any dolphins caught in the nets are set free without injuries. To take it a step further, look for terms like pole-caught, fad-free, and school-caught to support brands that minimize the catching of other marine species. Plain old tuna straight from the can may be okay if you're a cat or if you're looking for a quick meal while hiking or camping, but otherwise there's no reason not to jazz it up. Try tuna salad for delicious sandwiches or lettuce wraps, a tuna melt, tuna casserole, or even tuna pot pie. There are so many ways to make tuna salad, so switch up your usual recipe for some variety. Our simple tuna salad recipe requires only 8 ingredients, and you'll have a tasty sandwich ready in about 6 minutes. Canned tuna, mayo, red onion, celery, pickles, crispy fried onions, salt, and pepper combine for the perfect tuna salad with a little bit of crunch. It's even better when you allow it to sit in the fridge overnight. Chicken pot pie is overrated. It's time you try tuna pot pie to use up some of your canned tuna stash. The crust is refrigerated biscuit dough, making this dish super easy to execute. Frozen veggies and canned tuna are combined into a creamy mixture along with a delicious blend of herbs and spices. It's ready in just 30 minutes, making it great for a busy weeknight. Pregnant women and young children need to be especially careful about mercury consumption, but it's something we all need to be aware of. Mercury makes its way into the atmosphere via natural and man-made means and gets into our rivers and oceans when it rains. When it enters the waters, it makes its way into the food web. What's the concern with mercury? The World Health Organization reports that it has toxic effects on babies in utero, lungs, kidneys, and several bodily systems. The main exposure route is by consuming methylmercury from fish and shellfish. The presence of mercury isn't a reason to give up canned tuna, though. Following some simple guidelines will help you minimize your consumption of the stuff. According to the Environmental Defense Fund, the mercury level in albacore tuna is 3 times higher than light tuna. The Harvard School of Public Health recommends limiting albacore tuna to once per week, while you can enjoy light tuna twice per week. To further manage your mercury intake, look for labels that say low mercury. Safe Catch Tuna, for example, tests each tuna for mercury content. Sometimes we take risks with our food, but taking chances on bad tuna is, well, risky business. Opening a can of food is usually uneventful, but if it spurts liquid upon opening, that's a sure sign that the tuna is not safe for consumption. According to the USDA, spurting liquid can indicate the presence of toxin-producing bacteria, which are very dangerous.
You ever eat tuna fish?
Oh, yes.
Toss foul-smelling tuna in the trash. We know what you're thinking, fish always smells bad. That's true, but if you eat tuna on a regular basis, you know what it normally smells like. If the scent is off, trash it and clean up the area where you opened it. Examine the color if the tuna passes the smell test. Tuna is typically pink or light tan in color. Discolored meat that's dark brown, green, or black gets thrown out. While tuna in water saves on fat and calories, you may be missing out on flavor. When a Reddit user in the Ask Culinary community asked for advice on improving their tuna salad, several members remarked that tuna in oil is more flavorful than water-packed tuna. Many Quora users reflect those sentiments, noting that not only does the oil yield better flavor, but it preserves the texture of the tuna as well, keeping it firmer. Should you buy oil-packed tuna instead? That depends on a couple of factors. Use tuna packed in water if you're going to dress it up with heavy ingredients like mayo and onions, such as in your typical tuna salad. The real flavor difference is noticeable when you enjoy it over a green salad or mixed with some pasta. For those recipes where you want the tuna flavor to shine through, use oil-packed tuna.
While canned salmon might not receive the same attention as canned tuna, it's just as affordable, nutritious, and versatile an ingredient. Keep watching, and by the end, we bet you'll be hooked on canned salmon. Salmon is one of the healthiest fish options out there. It's packed with protein and omega-3 fatty acids, as well as several vitamins and minerals. The high levels of omega-3 fatty acids make it an especially heart-healthy food, with the American Heart Association recommending at least 2 servings of fatty fish like salmon per week. While the word fatty might scare you off, it shouldn't. Omega-3 fatty acids are known to help decrease the risk of stroke and heart disease. Salmon is high in fat, but it's the unsaturated kind. Unsaturated fat, according to the Harvard School of Public Health, can help lower blood cholesterol and inflammation. Harvard Health Publishing puts canned fish on the same level as fresh health-wise, and a USDA study found slightly higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids in some canned salmon than in fresh salmon. Want specific numbers? 1 serving of canned salmon will provide at least 40% of the recommended daily intake of protein, at least 42% of the recommended daily intake of selenium, and at least 63% of the recommended daily intake of omega-3 fatty acids. It's high in vitamin D, which helps maximize calcium absorption, and is a good source of B vitamins that support skin and nerve health. Most canned salmon contains only salmon and salt. Added salt acts as both a preservative and flavor enhancer. But if you're watching your sodium intake, take a look at the nutrition label. 1 serving of most canned salmon brands contains somewhere between 200 and 300 milligrams of sodium, or around 10% of the recommended daily intake. Chicken of the Sea canned salmon and Kirkland's signature canned salmon all range between 200 and 240 milligrams of sodium per serving, while Bumblebee canned salmon creeps up to 250 milligrams. Star-Kissed canned salmon contains a whopping 320 milligrams of sodium per serving. To reduce sodium levels, you can always rinse your canned salmon after draining the liquid, per food scientist Dr. Andrew Clark. This shouldn't reduce the levels of omega-3 fatty acids in the fish. While the importance of flavor can't be understated, it's also useful to know whether canned salmon is better for you than canned tuna, or vice versa. Nutritionally speaking, they're both pretty healthy, with high amounts of protein that are roughly equivalent, though salmon contains a little more. Tuna, whether fresh or canned, is leaner than fresh or canned salmon, but as previously mentioned, the fat in salmon is the good kind. And it contains higher levels of those beneficial omega-3 fatty acids than tuna does. Interestingly, tuna packed in water retains more of its omega-3 fatty acids than tuna packed in oil. Canned salmon is rarely packed in oil, but if you have the option, you should go for a brand packed in water to get the most health benefits. Per Healthline, canned salmon is also the winner when it comes to vitamin D, but otherwise, tuna fish is on fairly equal footing, or should we say, finning.
Was I funny? No.
Salt content varies widely from brand to brand, but generally speaking, canned tuna and canned salmon contain comparable amounts of sodium. There is one other notable factor: mercury. Canned tuna infamously contains high levels of this metal, so the Environmental Defense Fund recommends limiting consumption and suggests canned salmon as a healthier alternative. Canned salmon does contain mercury as well, but at much lower levels. Per the Alaska Historical Society, the first salmon cannery in Alaska started in 1878. The salmon canning business expanded rapidly. In 1936, 8 million cases of canned salmon came out of Alaska alone. That's not to say the booming American industry was cause for unmitigated celebration. Overfishing and the absence of strict regulations was a real concern, as were the impacts upon indigenous people who traditionally relied on salmon stocks. Regardless of what was happening behind the scenes, by the early 1900s, canned salmon was popular among American consumers and people across the globe. It was around this same time, writes Slate, that canned tuna was initially introduced. Previously, tuna had not been valued or considered desirable. While tuna became a huge business in America by the 1950s and 60s, as of 2020, Americans were consuming 40% less tuna per capita than they were in the 1980s. The beginning of the pandemic boosted its profile as people were stocking their pantries with shelf-stable options. It did the same for its predecessor, canned salmon. Canned salmon is always salmon, but there's more than one variety of this fish. The 6 types of salmon found in North America are Chinook, Coho, Chum, Sockeye, Pink, and Atlantic salmon. Each kind of salmon varies in taste, texture, and appearance, ranging from pale pink, comparatively low in fat and relatively mild, to deep orange-red, quite oily and strong in salmon flavor. You can find most of these salmon varieties as fresh or frozen steaks and fillets, but canned salmon is almost always labeled either pink salmon or red salmon. Pink salmon is the most common species found in the Pacific Ocean. Canned pink salmon is on the milder side, so it's great for those who find stronger tasting salmon too fishy. However, it can be a bit on the mushy side. Canned red salmon is sockeye salmon, and is often labeled as such. According to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, sockeye is nicknamed red salmon because of the color the fish turn when they swim upriver to spawn. The flesh of sockeye is more vivid in color than pink salmon. Its taste is stronger and its texture richer and firmer. Another thing canned salmon has going for it is its sustainability, particularly compared with many brands of canned tuna. In either case, it's important to look for wild-caught and sustainably harvested fish to ensure the least environmental impact. Most canned salmon is made from wild-caught Alaskan salmon, in which case the label will note that fact. According to The Atlantic, these salmon populations are far easier to keep tabs on than tuna, which means they're not in danger of being overfished, although other factors like climate change do impact their numbers. Modern methods of fishing for salmon are also more environmentally friendly and less likely to result in unintended catches compared to tuna fishing. Although canned tuna that is sustainably harvested in certain waters is almost on par with canned salmon, per the Environmental Defense Fund, the EDF rates wild Alaskan salmon as the best choice, ecologically speaking, and also notes its low mercury content. Farmed salmon that is raised in net pens is labeled the worst choice from an environmental perspective. Even if your salmon was caught in Alaska, that doesn't necessarily mean it was packed in the United States. Many brands process at least some of their catch in factories in Thailand, Vietnam, and China, which of course means greater carbon emissions associated with transportation. As with canned tuna, canned salmon is fully cooked and ready to eat right out of the tin. Unlike tuna, canned salmon sometimes contains skin and bones, primarily because the fish are smaller overall, and it's more difficult to cut portions of boneless flesh from them. This can actually be a good thing, nutritionally speaking. Canned salmon with bones contains a higher amount of calcium, and the cooking process softens the bones so they're easily crushed with a fork or your fingers when breaking up the meat. Any gelatinous skin can be picked out, but per Healthline it has more omega-3 fatty acids than the meat does. If the skin and bones gross you out, skinless and boneless canned salmon is widely available. Naturally, it costs a bit more due to the additional processing, but not so much that it's likely to be a deal-breaker. Wild Planet's skinless and boneless sockeye salmon, for instance, costs about 25 cents more per ounce than its sockeye with skin and bones. If you're curious about how canned salmon is made, the Bumblebee description of their salmon canning process is pretty standard. Heads, fins, tails, scales, and other unwanted parts are removed before the fish are cleaned, cut to size, and added to cans along with salt. Lids are sealed and stamped, and the canned salmon is cooked, cooled, labeled, and packaged for shipping. Need some ideas about how to eat canned salmon?
You make yourself a dang quesadilla.
Sure. But why not start by treating it any way you would tuna? Try a salmon salad sandwich, with or without mayo. You can serve it on crackers or greens if you're avoiding bread. You can add canned salmon to pasta to bulk it up and boost the flavor. It's also great on top of a simple garden salad. Or you can make a salmon Caesar if you're feeling fancy. Salmon patties are another easy way to transform canned salmon into a meal. Experiment with different spices to change them up. At breakfast time, try stirring canned salmon into scrambled eggs or quiche to start the day swimmingly. Anytime you need to incorporate a low-effort protein into something you're cooking, canned salmon is a great choice. Canned salmon's shelf life can easily extend past the use-by date, which is primarily there to indicate how long it will taste its best. And do you know how long canned it lasts under good conditions?
I don't know.
Generally, canned salmon will keep at least 3 to 5 years unopened and properly stored. Ditto for salmon that comes in a vacuum-packed pouch. Store canned salmon in a cool, dark place with fairly consistent temperature, and throw away any cans that develop leaks, bulges, rust spots, or severe dents. If the can looks fine, even if it's several years out of date, go ahead and open it. As long as the salmon still smells good and looks normal, it should still be safe to eat. Once you've opened canned salmon, store any leftovers in the fridge for no more than a few days. You may have heard that keeping opened cans in the refrigerator can leach metals into your food. While that is possible, especially for higher acid foods, the USDA says it's safe to do so for at least a few days. However, your canned salmon will probably taste better and worry you less if you transfer it to a glass or plastic container first. Still Tasty says you can freeze canned salmon in an airtight container for up to 3 months.
Sodium. So much sodium. It's seemingly everywhere in the canned soup aisle, no matter how many vegetables are included. Here's a guide to avoid the soups that hurt the heart and instead stock up on the more nutritious options. Chowder is a stew made with seafood like clams, shrimp, fish, or lobster, and either milk or cream. It originated in the early 18th century in England as a hearty meal that utilized a variety of seafood. But it's not exactly the healthiest option, as the creamy base adds a lot of fat and calories. For example, Progresso's traditional New England clam chowder contains more than 400 calories and nearly 20 grams of fat in an 18.5-ounce can. And its rich and hearty chicken corn chowder has almost 400 calories and 18.5 grams of fat in the same-sized can. Compare that to the same brand's traditional Manhattan clam chowder, which has a tomato base and contains only about 225 calories and only 4.5 grams of fat in a 19-ounce can.
Who wants chowder?
Much like chowder, bisques are known for their creaminess, and that can come at a price, as they tend to contain saturated fat. Eating too much saturated or trans fats can lead to high cholesterol levels, and a large accumulation of cholesterol can restrict blood flow in the arteries, potentially causing significant health problems, such as heart disease and strokes. When you compare bisques, it's clear they're not all the same. For example, 1 cup of Whole Foods Market lobster bisque has 20 grams of fat, 13 grams of saturated fat, and a half gram of trans fat. Whereas Campbell's Well Yes Butternut Squash Bisque has 5 grams of fat, 3 grams of saturated fat, and no trans fat. If you must buy a bisque, then a vegetable variety without heavy cream is the healthiest route. Broccoli is an excellent source of minerals, vitamins, fiber, and antioxidants, which may have anti-inflammatory properties. But there's a big difference between a bowl of steamed broccoli and creamy broccoli and cheese soup, as the latter adds a significant amount of saturated fat and sodium. A 15.5-ounce container of Campbell's Slow Kettle-style creamy broccoli cheddar bisque contains 28 grams of fat and 11 grams of saturated fat. That's 55% of the recommended daily amount of saturated fat. It also contains 1,420 milligrams of salt, which is 62% of the daily recommended amount. With this much saturated fat and sodium in one can, it's probably a better idea to make your own so that you can control the ingredients. You can swap out dairy-based milk with a plant-based variety, such as almond milk, which has no saturated fat. Potatoes offer significant health benefits, as they're a good source of fiber, potassium, calcium, vitamin B6, folate, magnesium, and antioxidants.
Potatoes. Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
But when you have potatoes in soup form, you have to keep an eye out for too much salt and too many preservatives. And potato soups often have extra ingredients like bacon or cheese, which can add additional fat and calories. For example, one 15.5-ounce container of Campbell's Slow Kettle-style baked potato soup with applewood smoked bacon contains 430 calories and 30 grams of fat, including 10 grams of saturated fat, which is half of the daily recommended amount. And with 1,420 milligrams of sodium, you're already at 62% of the daily recommendation. This soup also includes MSG, a preservative that is found in many processed foods. While MSG is generally considered safe, it has been shown to overstimulate the appetite. Mushrooms are low in sodium, rich in vitamin D and vitamin B6, and they may protect the brain from mild cognitive impairment and aid in overall gut health. Despite all that, you might want to think twice about opening a can of cream of mushroom soup. Sadly, this variety is loaded with way too much salt. If you haven't noticed already, that tends to be a common problem among canned soups. For example, Campbell's Cream of Mushroom has 870 milligrams of sodium per half-cup serving, which represents 1/3 of the daily salt allowance recommended by the American Heart Association. So take it easy on your ticker and skip the cream of mushroom. Chicken and dumpling soup is a classic Southern comfort food, but the nutritional value of some popular canned versions might make you uncomfortable. Unfortunately, the high sodium levels in canned chicken and dumpling soups are rather significant, and with high sodium comes a possible increase in blood pressure.
Turning out to be a real pain in the ass.
One 241-gram serving of Dinty-Moore chicken and dumplings, which is about 1 cup, has 200 calories, 7 grams of fat, 2 grams of saturated fat, and 940 milligrams of sodium. Meanwhile, Campbell's Chunky Creamy Chicken and Dumplings has 170 calories, 10 grams of fat, 2 grams of saturated fat, and 890 milligrams of salt per cup. And 1 cup of Progresso's Creamy Roasted Chicken with Herb Dumplings has 150 calories, 7 grams of fat, 2 grams of saturated fat, and 680 milligrams of sodium. Rather than reach for a can at the grocery store, we recommend making a healthier version of chicken and dumplings yourself at home. You can reduce the amount of sodium by making your own broth, and you can omit some of the fat by switching out the heavy cream with plant-based milk. Canned chili is often a no-no as well, though not all varieties are the same. There can be a wide range of fat, calories, and sodium in each brand's product. For example, Wolf brand chili without beans contains over half the daily recommended amounts of sodium and saturated fat. It's also high in cholesterol. According to registered dietitian and nutritionist Sharon Palmer, a serving with more than 460 milligrams of sodium is generally considered too high. That's 20% of the daily recommended amount. With this in mind, the Eden chili made with organic black beans, quinoa, and spices is a solid option, as it's not too salty and it's made with lots of veggies and whole grains. One of the best canned soups to buy is the classic tomato. That's because tomatoes are rich in lycopene, an antioxidant that has many health benefits, including fighting off the development of chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease. Furthermore, it may also protect the immune system and can lower the risk of developing certain cancers. Lycopene also gives tomatoes their red color. And let's not ignore that tomatoes taste great and give lots of flavor to your soup. Amy's Organic Chunky Tomato Bisque, light in sodium, is a great choice. It's bursting with tomato flavor and doesn't taste under-seasoned, despite having reduced salt. Wolfgang Puck's Organic Tomato Basil Bisque is also a tasty option. Both of these soups are organic. Another one that's worth a buy is Pacific Foods Organic Creamy Tomato Soup, which is rich in protein and potassium and doesn't have too many added sugars. And whichever canned tomato soup you choose, you can always enjoy it with the classic pairing of grilled cheese.
How's the grilled cheese?
Actually, it's amazing.
When you think of canned soups, you probably consider beans an added ingredient, rather than the star attraction. But black beans do indeed offer main character energy when you're eating black bean soup, and for good reason, as they're full of fiber, which can boost your heart health and digestive health. They're also great sources of magnesium and iron. Fooducate, which is a free mobile app to help Americans learn about their food, ranks Goya's black bean soup with a grade of A-. It contains 120 calories per serving and less than half a teaspoon of added sugar. Trader Joe's Latin-style black bean soup is also a winner, even though it comes in a Tetra Pak container rather than a can. However, do be aware that both of these soups are high in salt, which of course is a recurring issue in the canned soup aisle. Lentils are a powerhouse in soups. They're packed with proteins, fiber, calcium, iron, potassium, folate, and more. According to the Good Housekeeping Nutrition Lab, Amy's light in sodium lentil soup is among the healthiest canned soups on the market. It contains half the salt of the original, and it's a great source of fiber and protein without added sugar. It's also 100% vegan and organic. This variety is also a top pick for culinary expert Ligia Lugo, a recipe developer and co-founder of the Daring Kitchen. As she revealed to The Strategist, she and her husband always keep their pantry stocked with a few cans. Some other lentil options that are worthy of high grades include Progresso's lentil with vegetables and Health Valley's organic no-salt added lentil soup. According to the American Heart Association, adults should be eating 5 daily servings of vegetables, such as corn, carrots, potatoes, broccoli, and bell peppers. Thankfully, these particular veggies are often available in canned soups, and one particularly great option in this area is Campbell's line of Well Yes. So go ahead and stock up your pantry with them to ensure that you'll always have veggies available.
Can soup be a beautiful thing? Well, yes!
The Well Yes lightly salted vegetable noodle soup is a particularly smart choice. So is the Health Valley canned organic minestrone, which features lots of veggies, including organic peas, spinach, tomatoes, celery, carrots, and more. And Health Valley's organic vegetable soup, which is also loaded with organic veggies naturally enough, is another great product to consider. Chicken soup is pretty much the gold standard soup for when you're a little under the weather, or when you just want some cozy comfort food. One study found that it has an anti-inflammatory effect, which certainly may help you feel better when you're sick. However, not all canned chicken soups are the same. Just as with other varieties of soup, they can be high in salt and fat, so always pay attention to the nutritional information. Good Housekeeping put together a list of top canned soups, which included Pacific Foods' organic Southwest-style chicken tortilla. They noted its yummy flavor and praised it for being dairy-free, packed with protein and fiber, and low in calories and fat. Still, it's not perfect, as it is a little too salty. Campbell's Chicken Noodle is a bona fide classic that often tops the list of best canned chicken noodle soups for its addictive umami flavor, and Progresso's traditional chicken noodle is another great option that includes chunks of chicken and sliced carrots. You'd be wise to stock up on canned minestrone, an Italian vegetable-based soup that often includes tomato, beans, and rice or pasta. Minestrone recipes can vary, but you can generally expect cannellini beans, which are packed with protein, folate, iron, and many more healthy ingredients. Minestrone soup is typically a good source of fiber and protein. Consumer Reports did a blind taste test of 15 soups, ultimately identifying 3 as overall quality choices: Tabachnik minestrone, Trader Joe's organic hearty minestrone, and Zuppa Rustica minestrone. Some other minestrone soups that also fit the bill include Amy's light in sodium organic minestrone, Campbell's condensed minestrone, Campbell's Well Yes minestrone, Health Valley organic minestrone no salt added, Progresso reduced sodium hearty minestrone, and Tabachnik low sodium minestrone.
Mamma mia. Mamma mia.
Canned split pea soup is another healthy and tasty selection for your pantry, as split peas are rich in iron, zinc, and protein. Eating peas and other legumes can help you manage health conditions including hypertension, inflammation, prediabetes, and cholesterol. But do keep in mind, as with all soups, that you should check the label for sodium levels. 1/2 cup of Campbell's split pea with ham and bacon condensed soup has 170 calories, 2 grams of fat, 0.5 grams of saturated fat, and 790 milligrams of sodium, which is 34% of the recommended daily value. And do note that 1 can contains 2.5 servings, so if you plan to eat the whole thing, that's a lot of salt. And that's not the only pea soup on the market that ratchets up the salty content. You're better off considering a low-sodium variety like Amy's Organic Split Pea Light in Sodium, which has only 310 milligrams of sodium, as well as 120 calories, 1 gram of fat, and no saturated fat.
Worried about nuclear war, prepping for a pandemic, or maybe you're just eating cheap? Either way, there's only one food you'll ever need to eat. A well-stocked pantry includes a number of basic ingredients that you should always have on hand. If you're a salt-of-the-earth survivalist or just someone who wants to keep a steady budget, you can't do much better than canned foods. Of course, you might be wondering what canned foods are best to stock up on and which have the longest shelf life. After all, no one wants to be stuck with cans of food that go bad before you even get to eat them. While all canned foods can last a good few years, canned meats and vegetables can last the longest. Surprisingly, canned meat can last on the shelf from 4 to 10 years, and canned vegetables can have a shelf life of 3 to 8 years. Certain dehydrated foods, such as carrots and corn, can last anywhere between 10 and 25 years. And here are some foods that, with proper storage, can last you for as long as 30 or more years. Take beans, for example.
A million housewives every day pick up a tin of beans and say, beans means Heinz.
According to many sources, canned cooked beans last 5 years or longer, similar to other canned vegetables and legumes. However, researchers at Brigham Young University have found that canned dried beans can last several times as long. They ran an experiment on the quality of dried beans after 30 years. The results showed that the beans had suffered some loss of quality, which was unavoidable due to the amount of time that passed, but that they were still perfectly acceptable to eat. The Provident Prepper also tested dried beans after 18 years. These dried beans were sealed in large cans, and they noted a sweet metallic smell after opening the cans. However, after the beans were rinsed, the smell, which is a product of long-term canning, quickly went away. The beans were able to be made into 15 different meals that the website claimed tasted delicious. How long beans last depends on how you store them. Utah State University has discussed the ideal conditions to store dried beans, for example. The key is eliminating oxygen contact. Either a number 10 can or a Mylar-type bag are best, but canning jars are also suitable for small quantities. Oxygen absorbers should also be used within the packaging, and the containers should be kept in a cool, dry, and dark place. Sudden changes in temperature or prolonged exposure to temperatures above 75 degrees Fahrenheit can cause spoilage. Many readily available dried beans make great candidates for long-term storage, including adzuki, kidney, black-eyed peas, and black and navy beans. Pinto beans have been the subject of multiple studies, so they're a sure bet too. Split peas and lentils, though, not actually beans, are also great options. Soybeans will keep for up to 10 years, but their higher oil content means they will spoil more quickly than other types of beans. It's important to know how to recognize the signs of deterioration with canned foods, however. Severe rusting can cause tiny holes which sacrifice the integrity of the can, for example. You also need to look for signs that bacteria or yeast has grown inside the can. The warning signs include loose or bulging jar lids, leaking or dented cans, and bad smells. In a worst-case scenario, improperly canned foods could cause botulism. Botulism is caused by the bacteria Clostridium botulinum and can lead to paralysis, breathing difficulties, or even death. This bacteria causes no change in taste, sight, or smell of the canned food, but can be fatal even when consumed in small quantities. For this reason, it is very important to carefully inspect cans for signs of damage. Storing beans in a clean and proper way ensures you'll have plenty of food supply for years to come. Even better, the many amazing recipes you can rustle up with a can of beans means that whether you're hunkering down for a pandemic, hiding out in a bunker, or just focusing on frugality, you'll always have something delicious and nutritious to eat.
Even if you have never tried them, chances are you've seen them on grocery store shelves next to other canned meat classics like Spam and corned beef hash. Of course, we're talking about Vienna sausages. To the unfamiliar eye, they may look suspiciously similar to the hot dogs we know and love. But the two meaty, savory treats have some subtle yet meaningful differences. The first is obvious to anyone who's tried one of each. Vienna sausages tend to be softer in texture than most hot dogs, which offer the familiar light yet snappy casing and firm bite. The second crucial difference doesn't even require tasting them. Vienna sausages are shorter and have open ends, while longer hot dogs are closed within their casings. There are also some finer distinctions between the two. Traditionally, Vienna sausages included a variety of meat from pigs, cows, and even horses, while Frankfurters typically used only pork. In modern times, this has changed, with several top hot dog brands like Hebrew National selling all-beef kosher versions. These are often considered higher-end products than mixed meat dogs. The two sausages have crucial differences in their origins as well. Vienna sausages were originally referred to as Wieners, a term derived from the German name for Vienna, Wien. While it's not clear whether they were first made in Vienna or simply named after the area, They're nonetheless distinct from Frankfurters, which unsurprisingly trace their roots to Frankfurt, Germany. It's important to note that the canned, mass-produced Vienna sausages you'll find on the supermarket shelf differ from the versions available in other parts of the world, particularly Germany and nearby countries. American Vienna sausages are produced from an almost paste-like mixture of meat and spices that are fully cooked and sometimes smoked. European Vienna sausages are typically sold in delis, meat cases, or as street food instead of canned, and they are served with a light casing, similar to an American hot dog. So while there are some noteworthy distinctions, the two do share many similarities. That's especially true when compared to the many other types of sausages popular in cultures all across the globe. Despite their similarities, it seems there is far less enthusiasm over Vienna sausages, those in a can, anyway, than there is for the beloved hot dog. Are these weenies perhaps an acquired taste? If so, it's one that not everyone's been able to acquire. One Reddit discussion devoted to these sausages did unearth a few fans, though even those who liked them didn't seem to display any overt enthusiasm. The one word that recurred most often in the comments thread, however, was disgusting, with gross running a close second. One Redditor who pulled no punches said of the sausages, "They look like embalmed baby fingers and taste like." Over on Quora, these pudgy pink porkish products didn't fare much better. Some said they ate Vienna sausages when they were kids but couldn't stand them as adults, while one person who called them nasty pointed out that the texture is nothing like sausage. Vienna sausages are pre-cooked and may be eaten straight from the can, which makes them convenient for stocking your doomsday bunker. If the zombie apocalypse isn't imminent, however, it might be a better idea to heat them up. As with any ready-to-eat meat product, there's always a slight chance of bacterial contamination that might result in food poisoning. Heating them up to a temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit should result in a safer sausage. We'd suggest frying, grilling, or baking rather than microwaving, as anything that can alter the texture would be a step in the right direction. In fact, should you be trying Vienna sausages for the first time, you may wish to take a few extra steps to enhance the flavor a bit. One Redditor suggests mixing them with ramen and other ingredients to make a kind of DIY bude jjigae, while another recommends using them to make fried rice with a fried egg on top. Still, others prefer dousing them in hot sauce.
Red beans and rice, chili, endless varieties of soup, and meringue? Yes, beans. These surprisingly healthy legumes need some careful handling to bring out their full potential. Certain canned items, like fruit and syrup, are ready to eat, but beans minimally require 2 steps: rinsing and draining. According to Bush's Best spokesperson, T.C. Moore, it consists of water and salt, which cause the legumes to release starches over time. While you shouldn't toss it all away, it's advisable to separate it. They become coated in the salted, starchy liquid when they're canned, so to avoid undesirable flavors or textures from the residue, you should always rinse canned beans. The Test Kitchen folks at Better Homes and Gardens point out that rinsing also helps eliminate any metallic flavors they might have acquired from the can. It's also worth noting that the primary nutritional downfall of canned beans is their sodium content. However, according to the results of a 2011 study published by the Journal of Culinary Science and Technology, there is a notable decrease in sodium content before and after rinsing them. As an added bonus, nutritionists note that passing canned beans through water can lower the compounds that create digestive discomfort and gas. Nevertheless, depending on the dish you're making, you might not want excess water either. Be sure to shake the beans off in a colander and leave them to drain for a few minutes following a rinse. While a good rinse is beneficial for several reasons, you don't have to dump the liquid from canned beans into your sink. As it turns out, it offers many interesting culinary benefits. Since it consists of salt, water, and bean starch, it can work as both a flavoring and thickening agent in soups and stews. Meanwhile, canned chickpea liquid, aka aquafaba, has become a superstar ingredient in vegan baking. Not only does it act as a suitable binder thanks to its high starch content, but it also makes an admirable egg or egg white substitute, as Bob's Red Mill explains. The site lists the appropriate conversions. Use 1 tablespoon to mimic an egg yolk, 2 tablespoons for an egg white, and 3 for a whole egg. Unlike swaps using flax or chia seeds, aquafaba can hold air as it's whipped, turning into foam and ultimately rising, much like a meringue. Don't think this trick should be limited to vegan baking either. Aquafaba can save your spontaneous baked creation when you realize you've run out of eggs. And rest assured, your chickpea liquid treats won't divulge their secret. Canned food is especially convenient thanks to its durability. However, every now and then, the rigid aluminum exterior of the can is damaged, be it through the distribution and shipping process or when you accidentally drop it. While the source of the dent in the latter case is evident, buying a compromised can is a bit of a riskier scenario.
Could be lunch meat, could be peaches, who knows?
If we're only talking about a minor indentation, your beans should be fine. However, the U.S. Department of Agriculture reports that more pronounced dents with notably sharp edges are potentially unsafe. In particular, when the seam of the can is damaged, bacteria have a direct route of entry. To determine whether the airtight seal has been affected, press down on the lid to see if there is a popping sound. To alleviate any hesitations about the state of the insides, just open the can and examine the contents. Any hissing, spraying, or foul odor signifies that you should toss it out. Meanwhile, some cans show signs of bloating, with or without dents. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration notes that this characteristic can be due to microorganism activity or spoilage. If you're ever in doubt, don't take a chance. Substituting dried beans with canned in a recipe is a good trick to reduce prep time and get dinner on the table faster. However, you risk ending up with less than stellar results if you don't modify recipes to compensate. For starters, even if you rinse your can of legumes, it will still contain notably more sodium. Canned beans absorb some of the salted water they are stored in, whereas dried ones first soak in whatever you cook them in. If you're making an aromatic broth, it won't enhance your canned beans quite as much as the alternative. While your broth or stew will still be packed with flavor, the legumes will retain a fairly one-dimensional taste, unless they simmer for at least half an hour. Don't push it on the duration though, or the structural integrity of the beans will begin to deteriorate. Conversely, given their dry and hard characteristics, dried legumes maintain far more bite as they cook. Be sure to adjust the cooking time if you're following a recipe meant for the latter. Naturally, 1 cup of plump canned beans isn't equivalent to the same volume dried. The correct ratio varies depending on the type of legume, but typically 1 cup of dehydrated beans can equal 2.25 to 3 cups of the canned type. Meanwhile, Cook's Illustrated makes the conversion from 1 pound of dried beans to 58 ounces of canned ones, which can be 3 to 4 cans. Some recipes are more forgiving and might just result in a dish with less bulk, since dehydrated beans just about double in size and weight as they cook. You can be pretty lenient with a hearty stew, but this shouldn't be the case if you're aiming for a specific consistency. You can bet that you'll need to add more liquid to your food processor if you accidentally double the quantity of chickpeas in your hummus recipe. No matter what you're preparing, be sure to double-check the units of measurement to avoid having to perform significant adjustments. You might think that a recipe written for dried beans only requires a few modifications in quantity and cooking time, but it goes beyond that. As mentioned, canned beans usually sit in a brine solution of salt, water, and their own starch. Granted, this may vary depending on whether you are working with a reduced sodium canned product. Still, that's a far cry from dehydrated beans, which require plenty of water and salt before you even start seasoning them, according to your desired flavor profile. To distinguish your meal from basic legumes in a can, simmering them with herbs and spices infuses rich flavors and does wonders to enhance their quality. Just because you don't have time to begin with dried beans from scratch, it doesn't mean you have to settle for less flavor. Olive oil is guaranteed to make plain legumes taste better, and spices like garlic powder, chili flakes, thyme, rosemary, oregano, cumin, coriander, and paprika are all great starting points for your culinary experimentation. Sometimes you only have time to toss a can of rinsed chickpeas in with some other veggies, then call it a day. And while that's partly why we love the efficiency of canned beans, they also have far more potential. Whipping up a 3-bean chili recipe or blitzing up a can of chickpeas for homemade hummus are obvious options, but there's so much more to be done.
But combine one flavor with another, and something new was created.
Vegetarian bean burgers are a delicious version of a meat-based dish. If avocados aren't in season, or you're over the green toast phenomenon, cannellini beans on toast are the creamy alternative you didn't realize you needed in your life. For a textural opposite, roasted chickpeas will surely be your new favorite crunchy snack, and you can easily modify the recipe based on your desired flavor profile. Your creations don't have to remain on the savory spectrum of flavors either. Canned chickpeas, white beans, or black beans make excellent ingredients in several baked treats like brownies or blondies. Much like you have to be vigilant about whether your recipe calls for 2 cups of dried versus canned beans, you'll also have to take note of overall cooking times. While dried beans can easily simmer for a couple of hours, you'll end up with a mushy mess if you try the same with the canned version. Because they're meant to be ready to use, canned beans are already cooked. Nonetheless, chances are you might want to season the legumes or incorporate them into a preparation that requires cooking. Southern Living also notes that some types of beans, such as black, kidney, and cannellini, require a bit more liquid as you cook them, or else they may become too dry. Use this as an excuse to pack in more flavor by simmering them in a broth or water seasoned with aromatics. After half an hour at low heat, they should be perfectly creamy and ready to eat. Much longer, and you're veering into unidentified pulp territory. Although canned foods last for years, according to the USDA, and maybe even indefinitely, once the packaging is compromised, the shelf life quickly drops. You're looking at 3 to 4 days once a can of beans is opened, much like any other perishable food item. As it happens, the handy vessel they've been stored in up until you eat them is not ideal for leftovers. While the USDA assures consumers that these cans are not unsafe, they can impart metallic flavors to the food. In particular, those with a high acid content, tomatoes and pineapple, for instance, are more likely to run this risk due to possible corrosive activity. For best results, rinse and drain the entire can of beans, and store whatever you don't use in an airtight glass or plastic container in your refrigerator. Since the purpose of these boxes is food storage, you can rest assured that they're most suited to the task. Depending on your bean consumption, it's fair that you might not want to eat an entire can in each sitting. And while you can incorporate them into recipes for your weekly meal prep, variety is the spice of life. Even though there are times when we are happy to dig into a bowl of chili on repeat, in other instances, we want new and exciting meals regularly. In these cases, your best bet is to freeze leftover beans, since you won't be getting much out of them past 3 days. However, much like when you're storing them in the refrigerator, how you store them is important. According to Ontario bean growers, start by rinsing and draining the legumes in a colander. Then pat them dry and transfer them to an airtight container or a sealed plastic bag. Bush's Best suggests covering the beans with water if you store them in a container, but it isn't necessary. You can freeze them for no longer than 1 to 2 months to maintain optimal quality. Once you're ready for more, let them thaw, drain off the excess water, and use the legumes as you would straight out of the can. Instinctively, you might jump to the conclusion that canned beans don't have the same nutritional benefits as dehydrated ones, given their convenient, ready-to-eat nature. After all, there's something about the process of opening a metal can that feels unnatural compared to legumes in a raw and dried state. Nonetheless, the difference isn't as large as you might imagine. Plus, anything that gets you eating healthy food is worth consuming.
You're not just knocking them out with great taste, you're giving them fantastic nutrition.
Canned or dried beans contain notable amounts of protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. The canning process also helps transform the fiber into a more digestible form, eliminating physical discomfort later on. If you're trying to cut down on sodium, you're in luck. As mentioned before, you can rinse beans to decrease the salt content of canned beans. Alternatively, you can buy reduced sodium versions. Perhaps, up until now, you've only considered canned beans sold at the grocery store. However, much like canning pickles and preserves, the same resourcefulness can be employed to make your own canned beans. Since you're using dried beans to begin with, you'll even eliminate any issues related to salt content or worries about the material used in standard cans. Before the idea intimidates you, know that canning requires following basic yet important directions. You'll need a pressure canner and clean glass jars. But beyond that, it's really just a matter of performing each step with intention. Depending on the type and quantity of beans, as well as the size of your pressure canner, the National Center for Home Food Preservation notes that the duration of cooking will vary. Starting with dried beans, soak them for several hours before boiling them to cook. Transfer the boiled beans and hot water into sterilized jars, ensuring that everything remains submerged. If you want to add a pinch of salt or any other seasoning, now's the time. Place the lids over the jars and pop them into the pressure canner to seal. Follow the instructions for your specific appliance for the best and safest results. Home canned beans? How cool is that?
Cool beans.
Cool beans.